Tonight, we embark on a gentle journey into one of life's most profound questions. Not the kind of question that keeps you awake at night, but the kind that, when understood, finally allows you to find deep, meaningful rest. What is the real purpose of life? Society tells us it's happiness, success, achievement. The accumulation of experiences and possessions that make us feel complete. But what if everything we've been taught about life's purpose is backwards? We'll explore ancient Zen wisdom that reveals a truth so simple, so elegant, that once you see it, you can never unsee it. This isn't about changing your entire life. It's about changing how you see the life you already have. Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into the surface that supports you. Take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, let go of the day that has passed. Whatever happened today, whatever you accomplished or didn't accomplish, simply let it be. In old Japan, there lived a merchant named Kenji. By every measure of his society, he was successful. His tea shop in Kyoto was the most prosperous in the district. People came from neighboring towns to buy his rare teas. His home was filled with beautiful things. His family was well fed and respected. Yet every night, as Kenji lay on his silk futon, a strange emptiness would settle over him like morning mist. He would think of all he had achieved, and somehow it felt like nothing at all. The taste of success had become as bland as yesterday's rice. One evening, feeling particularly restless, Kenji decided to take a walk through the bamboo forest near his home. The moon was full, casting silver shadows between the tall stalks. As he walked, he heard the soft sound of someone weeping. Following the sound, he found an old Zen monk sitting beside a small stream. The monk's robe was patched and simple, his begging bowl beside him empty. Yet his tears were not tears of sorrow, but something Kenji had never seen before. They seemed to shimmer with a strange kind of joy. "Master," Kenji said gently, "why do you weep?" The old monk looked up with eyes that held the depth of still water. "I weep because I have everything," he said. "And you, successful merchant, why do you suffer?" Kenji was taken aback. "I don't suffer, master. I have a prosperous business, a fine home, everything a man could want." The monk smiled. "Then why did the emptiness in your chest bring you to the forest tonight?" Kenji felt something turn over in his heart. How could this stranger see what he had hidden even from himself? "Sit," the monk said, patting the moss beside him. "Let me tell you about the two kinds of thirst. As you listen to this story, let your own body sink a little deeper. Feel the weight of your limbs. Notice how your breath moves in and out without any effort from you. Just like Kenji, you may have spent years running towards something, not knowing what you were really seeking." The monk's voice was soft like wind through bamboo. "There is the thirst of the body," he began, "and the thirst of the heart. When your body thirsts for water, you drink, and the thirst is satisfied. Simple. But the heart's thirst is different. The more you drink what the world offers, the thirstier you become." Kenji frowned. "I don't understand." "You achieved success to fill an emptiness. Did the emptiness disappear?" "No," Kenji admitted. "It only grew larger. This is because you were trying to fill a hole that can never be filled from the outside. The harder you try, the bigger it gets. Like trying to satisfy hunger by looking at paintings of food. The monk picked up a smooth stone from beside the stream and held it up in the moonlight. "What do you see?" "A stone," Kenji replied. "Look closer." Kenji leaned in. The stone was ordinary grey granite, worn smooth by water. "I see a stone," he repeated. "Look with your heart, not your eyes." Kenji stared at the stone, and something strange began to happen. The longer he looked without trying to understand or categorize or judge, the more the stone seemed to glow. Not with light, but with a presence he had never noticed before. It was perfect, exactly as it was. Complete. Lacking nothing. "Now," the monk said softly, "you are beginning to see what you really are. Let your eyes close now if they haven't already. Feel the rhythm of your breathing. In this moment, you lack nothing. You are not incomplete. You are not broken." This is what the merchant was beginning to understand. The monk continued. The real purpose of life is not to get something you don't have. It's to realize what you already are. Most people spend their whole lives chasing shadows, never knowing they are already the light. "But how can that be?" Kenji asked. "I feel so empty, so restless." "Because you have been taught to look everywhere except where the treasure is hidden. It's like a fish asking where the ocean is. There's an old Zen story about a master and student that illustrates this perfectly. Let this story wash over you like gentle waves. A young monk named Iho was desperate to find enlightenment. He meditated until his legs went numb. He studied texts until his eyes burned. He traveled from temple to temple, seeking the perfect teacher who would finally give him what he lacked. One winter day, he arrived at a small temple where an ancient master lived alone. The master was in his garden, slowly raking fallen leaves. "Master," Eijo said, bowing deeply, "I have come to receive your wisdom. Please teach me the secret of enlightenment." The old master continued raking without looking up. "I'm busy," he said simply. Eijo waited. Hours passed. The master finished raking, then began again in a different pattern. The sun moved across the sky. Finally, as twilight approached, Eijo could contain himself no longer. "Master, I have waited all day. When will you teach me?" The master stopped and looked at him with eyes like autumn leaves. "I have been teaching you all day." "I don't understand." "You've done nothing but rake leaves." The master smiled. "And what were you doing while I raked?" "Waiting," Eijo said, frustrated. "And what were you waiting for?" "For you to give me enlightenment." "Ah," the master said, setting down his rake. "And while you were waiting for something you didn't have, what happened to this moment?" Eijo opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He realized he had been so focused on the future teaching that he had completely missed the teaching happening right in front of him. The master's presence. The falling leaves. The sound of the rake on stone. The feeling of cold air on his face. "Master," Eijo whispered, "I have been so busy looking for the moon that I missed the finger pointing at it." "Not quite," the master said gently. "You have been so busy looking for the moon that you missed that you are the moon. Feel your breath moving in and out. You are not breathing to get somewhere else. You are not breathing to become someone different. You are breathing because you are alive and that aliveness is enough. It has always been enough. Back by the stream, the merchant Kenji sat in silence as these words settled into his heart like seeds in fertile soil. The monk's presence beside him was like sitting next to a warm fire on a cold night. Not because the monk was doing anything special, but because he had stopped doing anything unnecessary. "Master," Kenji said finally, "if what you say is true, why do I feel so driven to achieve, to acquire, to become more than I am?" The monk chuckled, a sound like water over stones. "Because no one ever told you that you were already complete. From the time you were small, you were taught that you were lacking something, that you needed to earn your worth. That happiness was somewhere else, with someone else, in some other moment." He gestured to the flowing stream beside them. "Does this water try to become wetter? Does it struggle to flow downhill? Does it suffer because it's not tea or wine?" "No," Kenji said. "It simply flows according to its nature. And in that flowing, it finds perfect expression. This is what the sages call wu-wei, effortless action, not trying to be anything other than what you are." The moon had climbed higher, casting everything in silver light. Kenji felt something in his chest beginning to loosen, like a fist that had been clenched for so long he'd forgotten it could open. "But my business, my responsibilities," Kenji said. "Should I abandon everything?" "Why would you abandon anything?" the monk asked. "The stream doesn't abandon being water when it becomes a river. Your work can become an expression of your true nature rather than a desperate attempt to prove your worth." He picked up his empty begging bowl and held it up. "This bowl is most useful when it's empty. Not because emptiness is better than fullness, but because only an empty bowl can be filled. Only an empty mind can receive wisdom. Only an empty heart can be flooded with love. As you rest here now, notice the space between your thoughts. That space is not empty in the way we usually think of emptiness. It's full of potential, full of peace, full of the awareness that notices everything without being disturbed by anything." The monk stood slowly, his movements like flowing water. "Come," he said to Kenji. "Let me show you something." They walked deeper into the bamboo forest until they came to a small clearing where the moonlight fell unobstructed. In the center of the clearing was a large boulder, split perfectly down the middle by some ancient force. "What do you see?" the monk asked. Kenji looked at the broken rock. "A boulder that's been damaged, split in two." "Look again," the monk said. "This time, don't look with your ideas about how things should be." Kenji stared at the split boulder. Slowly, his perception began to shift. Instead of seeing a broken thing, he began to see the perfect expression of the forces that had shaped it. The way the moonlight fell into the crack, illuminating the crystal formations inside. The small ferns that had made their home in the crevice. The way the two halves leaned toward each other like old friends. "It's not broken," Kenji whispered. "It's complete exactly as it is." "Yes," the monk said. "And so are you. So is everyone. The crack in your heart that you've been trying to heal isn't damage. It's where the light gets in. This is the first great understanding that Zen offers us about life's real purpose. We are not broken beings trying to become whole. We are not incomplete beings trying to find our missing pieces. We are expressions of life itself, perfect in our imperfection, complete in our incompleteness. Feel this truth settling into your body now. You don't need to understand it with your mind. Let your heart receive it. You are enough. You have always been enough. The purpose of life is not to become something you're not. It's to realize what you've always been. The merchant Kenji walked back through the forest that night with lighter steps than he'd taken in years. Not because his circumstances had changed, but because his relationship to his circumstances had transformed. The emptiness in his chest was still there, but now he understood it differently. It wasn't a lack to be filled. It was space for life to move through him. The next morning, he returned to his tea shop with new eyes. His customers looked different to him now. Not as sources of profit, but as fellow travelers, each carrying their own hidden wholeness. His work felt different too. Not like a burden to prove his worth, but like a dance he was invited to join. Nothing had changed, and everything had changed. This is what happens when we stop asking life to make us happy and start asking what life wants to express through us. When we stop trying to get something from existence and start wondering what we can give back. When we realize that the purpose of life is not to satisfy the small self that always wants more, but to discover the vast self that lacks nothing. Let your breathing slow down even more now. Feel yourself sinking deeper into rest. The questions that drove you to seek happiness, success, achievement, these questions came from love. A love for life, a love for growth, a love for experiencing all that existence offers. This love doesn't need to be abandoned. It just needs to be redirected. Instead of asking, "How can I be happy?" we can ask, "How can I be awake?" Instead of asking, "How can I get what I want?" we can ask, "How can I want what is?" Instead of asking, "How can I become someone special?" we can ask, "How can I express what I already am?" These questions transform everything. They turn life from a problem to be solved into a mystery to be lived. They turn suffering from an enemy to be defeated into a teacher to be welcomed. They turn the ordinary moments of existence into gateways to the sacred. The old monk by the stream understood this. That's why his tears were tears of joy. He had found the great secret that most people never discover. You are not a human being trying to have a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being expressing itself as a human experience. This changes everything about how we live. It changes how we work, how we love, how we face difficulties, how we experience pleasure. It changes what we value and what we pursue. Most of all, it changes the question of purpose itself. The purpose of life is not to get anywhere else. It's to be fully here, not to become someone else, but to be completely yourself, not to achieve some future state of happiness, but to recognize the peace that's available right now, in this breath, in this moment, in this awareness that notices everything without being disturbed by anything. As you settle deeper into rest tonight, let this understanding seep into your bones. You are not on a journey to somewhere else. You are the destination you've been seeking. You are not preparing for life to begin. Life is flowing through you right now. You are not waiting for the real purpose to reveal itself. You are the purpose, expressing itself perfectly in this very moment. Sleep comes easily when we stop trying to be somewhere else. Rest is natural when we stop resisting what is. Peace is our birthright when we remember who we really are. Let these words fade now into the background of your awareness. Let your mind drift like clouds across an empty sky. You are held. You are complete. You are home. Tomorrow, when you wake, the world may look the same, but you will begin to see it with different eyes. The eyes of someone who knows the secret that the ancient Zen masters knew. The secret that changes everything and changes nothing at all. You are already what you seek. Let your breath deepen as we continue our gentle journey into the heart of ancient wisdom. Feel your body settling even more completely now, like a leaf finally coming to rest on still water. Now, let's explore the story of a young prince who discovered what you are discovering now, that the purpose of life is not what we think it is. This is not just history. This is your story, told through the life of one who walked this path before you. 2,500 years ago, in a kingdom nestled in the foothills of the Himalayas, a child was born who would change how humanity understands the very meaning of existence. But this change didn't happen through grand proclamations or miraculous powers. It happened through the simplest thing of all, waking up. The child's name was Siddhartha, and he was born into a palace that was like a dream made real. Imagine gardens where every flower was perfect, where the air itself seemed to shimmer with beauty. Walls covered in silk tapestries that told stories of gods and heroes. Floors of polished marble that reflected the light of golden lamps. As you rest here now, picture yourself in such a place. Feel the soft cushions beneath you, the gentle warmth of sunlight through precious windows, the sound of fountains playing in courtyards filled with jasmine and roses. This was Siddhartha's world, a world designed to satisfy every desire before it could even form. His father, the king, loved his son with the fierce protection that only a parent knows. He had been told by wise men that his son would either become a great ruler or a great spiritual teacher. Wanting to keep his son in the palace, the king made a decision that would shape young Siddhartha's entire understanding of life. He decided that his son would never see suffering. Every person who entered the palace was young and healthy. Every experience was beautiful and pleasant. When flowers wilted, they were immediately replaced. When anything broke, it vanished before the prince could notice. The palace was a bubble of eternal spring, where pain was as foreign as snow in summer. For 29 years, Siddhartha lived in this paradise. He married a beautiful princess who loved him deeply. They had a son whose laughter filled the palace halls like music. He learned the arts of music and poetry, of diplomacy and warfare. He had everything a human being could want. And yet, like the merchant Kenji we met earlier, something stirred in Siddhartha's heart. A restlessness that no pleasure could satisfy. A question that no luxury could answer. Feel that stirring in your own chest now. Perhaps you know it well. It's not dissatisfaction with what you have. It's a deeper knowing that there must be something more, something real beneath all the decorations of life. One night, unable to sleep despite the silk sheets and soft music, Siddhartha made a decision that would echo through the centuries. He asked his charioteer to take him beyond the palace walls. Just once. Just to see what lay outside his perfect world. What he discovered changed everything. On that first journey, Siddhartha encountered an old man, bent with age, his hair white as clouds, his skin marked by the passage of many seasons. Siddhartha had never seen aging before. The sight struck him like lightning. What has happened to this person? He asked his charioteer. This is old age, my lord. It comes to everyone who lives long enough. Everyone? Siddhartha whispered. Even me? Yes, my lord. Even you. Something cracked open in Siddhartha's understanding that day. The first crack in the shell of his protected life. For the first time, he understood that nothing lasts forever. Not youth, not beauty, not strength. Not even the perfect world his father had built for him. Let this understanding settle gently into your own awareness. Not as something frightening, but as something that makes this moment more precious. The breath you're taking right now will never come again. This particular configuration of awareness, peace, and presence is unique in all of history. On his second journey beyond the palace, Siddhartha encountered a person racked with illness. The sight of suffering without any way to escape it shook him to his core. On his third journey, he saw death itself, a body being carried to the cremation ground while family members wept. Each encounter was like a veil being lifted from his eyes. The comfortable illusions that had shaped his entire life began to dissolve. He realized that his palace was not the world. It was a shelter from the world. And no shelter, no matter how beautiful, could protect him from the fundamental realities of human existence. But it was the fourth encounter that changed his life completely. On this journey, Siddhartha saw a wandering monk. The man owned nothing but the simple robe on his back and a small bowl for food. His head was shaved, his feet were bare, and yet there was something in his eyes that Siddhartha had never seen before, not in all the luxury of the palace, not in all the beautiful faces of the court. The monk's eyes held peace. Not the peace of having everything you want, but the peace of wanting nothing you don't have. "Who is this man?" Siddhartha asked. "A seeker, my lord. One who has left the world to search for truth." That night, Siddhartha stood on his palace balcony, looking out at the star-filled sky. The question that had been growing in his heart finally became clear. If aging, sickness, and death were inevitable, if all the pleasure and beauty in the world could not protect him from these realities, then what was the point of life? What was real? What could he trust? He looked back at his sleeping wife and child, at the golden walls that had been his entire universe. And he knew that to find the answer to his question, he would have to leave everything behind. This is the moment that separates ordinary seeking from true spiritual awakening. Siddhartha realized that he could not find real answers from within the very system that had hidden truth from him. To see clearly, he would need to step outside everything he thought he knew. Feel your own willingness to let go of old ideas tonight. You don't need to leave your life behind like Siddhartha did. But you can let go of old ways of thinking about what life is for. You can step outside the palace of familiar assumptions and see with fresh eyes. In the darkest hour before dawn, Siddhartha quietly left the palace. He traded his royal robes for the simple clothes of a seeker. He cut off his long hair with his sword. He walked away from power, comfort, and security to discover what lay beyond the realm of temporary pleasures. For 6 years, he searched. He studied with the greatest teachers of his time, learning meditation techniques that could quiet the mind and expand awareness. He practiced severe austerities, eating only a grain of rice a day, sleeping on beds of thorns, believing that by punishing the body, he could free the spirit. But neither intellectual understanding nor physical extremes gave him the answer he sought. He found he could enter states of blissful concentration, but when he returned to ordinary consciousness, the fundamental questions remained. He could discipline his body until it was like a skeleton, but suffering continued to exist in the world. One day, weak from years of extreme fasting, Siddhartha collapsed by a river. A young village girl named Sujata found him there, more dead than alive. Without asking who he was or what he believed, she offered him a simple bowl of rice milk. As Siddhartha drank this nourishment, something profound occurred to him. His years of indulgence in the palace had not led to truth. His years of extreme deprivation had not led to truth either. Perhaps the answer lay somewhere between these extremes. This realization would later become one of the central teachings of his path, the middle way. Neither clinging to pleasure nor pushing it away. Neither indulging every desire nor denying every need. A balanced approach that honors both the body and the spirit. Let your own body find this balance now. Not forcing relaxation, but not holding on to tension either. Not trying to stay awake, but not forcing sleep. Simply allowing yourself to rest in the natural rhythm of being. Strengthened by Sujata's kindness, Siddhartha made his way to a large tree near the village of Bodh Gaya. Something in him knew that this was the place. This was the moment. He would sit under this tree until he found the answer to the question that had driven him from his palace. As the sun set on what would become the most important night in human spiritual history, Siddhartha settled into meditation beneath the wide branches of what we now call the Bodhi tree. He made a simple vow, "Let my skin wither, let my blood dry up, but I will not move from this seat until I have found the end of suffering." What happened that night has been told in many ways, with many mythical embellishments. But the essential truth is simple and profound. Siddhartha looked directly into the nature of existence without flinching, without turning away, without protecting himself with pleasant illusions. He saw that everything that arises also passes away. Every thought, every emotion, every sensation, every experience, all of it temporary, all of it in constant flux. He saw that suffering comes from trying to hold on to what cannot be held, from wanting things to be different than they are. But most importantly, he saw through the illusion of the separate self. The I that wants, that fears, that grasps and pushes away, he saw that this too was just another temporary phenomenon arising and passing in awareness. There's a beautiful Zen story that captures this moment of recognition. A monk named Genjo had been searching for enlightenment for many years. One day, while sweeping the monastery courtyard, a pebble flew from his broom and struck a bamboo fence post. At the sound of that small impact, something in Genjo's mind shifted completely. He began to laugh, not with humor, but with recognition. For years, he had been looking for his original face, his true nature, his Buddha mind. And suddenly he realized the sound of the pebble hitting bamboo was his true nature. The awareness that heard the sound was Buddha mind. The one who had been seeking was what he had been seeking. All these years, he said to his teacher later, I've been polishing a brick, trying to make it into a mirror. But I was already the mirror all along. This is what Siddhartha discovered under the Bodhi tree. Not some special state of consciousness, not some magical power, but the simple recognition of what had always been present. The awareness that was aware of seeking was what he had been seeking. As dawn broke over the tree where he sat, Siddhartha had become the Buddha, which simply means the awakened one. Not awakened to something new, but awakened from the dream of separation, from the illusion that he was lacking something. His first words after this awakening were filled with wonder. How marvelous! How marvelous! All beings are already enlightened. They simply don't realize it. Feel this recognition touching your own heart now. You are not broken. You are not incomplete. You are not on a journey to become someone else. You are the awareness in which all experience arises and passes away. You are the peace that was never disturbed, even by the disturbance. The Buddha's great discovery was not about achieving some special state. It was about recognizing what had always been true. Like the monk who cleaned the temple, like the merchant by the stream, like you resting here now, the seeking itself was arising in the very awareness that was being sought. This understanding completely transformed the Buddha's relationship to life. He had left the palace to escape suffering, but now he understood that suffering was not something to escape. 5. It was something to understand. Pain was inevitable. Birth, aging, sickness, death were part of life. But suffering, the extra layer of resistance, the "this shouldn't be happening," the desperate attempts to make impermanent things permanent, that was optional. For the next 45 years, the Buddha shared this understanding with anyone who would listen. Kings and beggars, scholars and farmers, young and old, all found freedom through his simple teaching. Not because he gave them something they didn't have, but because he helped them recognize what they had never lost. The teaching he offered was like a finger pointing at the moon. The finger was important, the practices, the ethics, the meditation techniques that help quiet the mind and open the heart. But the moon was the recognition itself, the direct seeing of your own true nature. This brings us to the heart of why Siddhartha's story matters for you, resting here tonight. His journey from palace to awakening reveals the real purpose of life. Not to avoid difficulty or maximize pleasure. Not to achieve some perfect state where nothing ever goes wrong. But to wake up from the dream that you are separate from life itself. The Buddha taught that there are 4 fundamental truths that, once understood, free us from unnecessary suffering. First, life includes experiences we don't like. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Difficulty, loss, change, and uncertainty are woven into the very fabric of existence. Trying to create a life without these elements is like trying to have a coin with only one side. Second, our suffering comes from fighting this reality, from insisting that life should be different than it is, from believing that our happiness depends on controlling what cannot be controlled. This resistance is like swimming against a river current, exhausting and ultimately futile. Third, there is a way to end this unnecessary struggle. Not by changing life, but by changing our relationship to life. By learning to flow with the current instead of fighting it. By finding the peace that exists even in the midst of difficulty. Fourth, there is a practical path for developing this new relationship. Not a path of belief or faith, but a path of direct experience. Simple practices that anyone can use to discover their own inner freedom. Let these truths settle into your awareness like seeds finding fertile ground. You don't need to understand them completely right now. Just let them rest in the quiet space of your heart. There's another Zen story that beautifully illustrates this transformation. A student approached his master, crying, "Master, I am filled with anxiety about my family, worry about my work, and sadness about growing old. Please teach me how to get rid of these feelings." The master listened compassionately, then handed the student a cup of muddy water. "Please make this water clear," he said. The student tried everything, filtering, stirring, adding clear water. Nothing worked. The mud just swirled around, making the water cloudier. Finally, exhausted, the student set the cup down and stopped trying. Gradually, the mud settled to the bottom by itself, and the water became crystal clear. "You see," the master said gently, "you don't need to get rid of anxiety, worry, or sadness. You just need to stop stirring them up with resistance. When you stop fighting these feelings, they settle naturally, and your true clarity shines through." This is what the Buddha discovered. Peace is not the absence of difficult experiences. Peace is the presence of awareness that remains undisturbed even when difficulties arise. Like the clear water that was always there beneath the mud. As you continue to settle deeper into rest, know that this same awareness is here right now. The awareness that notices your thoughts is peaceful. The awareness that notices your emotions is untouched by them. The awareness that notices your body is not limited by physical boundaries. You are not having an experience of awareness. You are awareness, experiencing itself as a human being. This was the Buddha's great insight, and it's available to you right now, in this moment, in this breath. The prince who left his palace thought he was going on a journey to find something he lacked. What he discovered was that he had never left home. What he found was what he had always been. What he achieved was the recognition that there was nothing to achieve. This is the real purpose of life, not to become enlightened, but to recognize that enlightenment is your natural state. Not to find peace, but to discover that you are the peace you seek. Not to solve the problem of existence, but to awaken from the dream that existence is a problem. Let this understanding accompany you now as you drift deeper into the natural rest that is your birthright. You are not a seeker looking for truth. You are truth itself, temporarily playing the role of a seeker. The game is almost over. The seeking is almost done. Like Siddhartha under his tree, you can stop trying so hard and simply be what you have always been. Complete, whole, at peace, already home. The Buddha's awakening under the Bodhi tree revealed something profound about balance. He had tried the extreme of luxury in his palace and the extreme of deprivation in the forest. Neither had led to freedom. True wisdom, he discovered, lies in the middle way, not as a compromise, but as a dynamic balance that honors both our human needs and our spiritual nature. This middle way is like learning to tune a musical instrument. Too tight and the string snaps. Too loose and it cannot make music. But find that perfect tension, and suddenly there is harmony. Tonight, let this harmony settle into your own being. Feel how your body naturally finds balance, not rigid, not collapsed, but gracefully present. This physical ease mirrors the inner balance we can discover in every aspect of life. In ancient China, there lived a master carpenter named Li Wei. His reputation extended far beyond his village, not because he built the most ornate furniture, but because everything he created had a quality that people couldn't quite name. His chairs were perfectly comfortable. His tables seemed to invite gathering. His houses felt like homes before anyone moved in. One day, a young apprentice asked him, "Master Li, what is your secret? How do you make wood become so alive?" Li Wei continued his careful planning of a piece of cedar, each stroke deliberate yet effortless. "There is no secret," he said quietly. "Only listening." "Listening to what?" The apprentice pressed. to what the wood wants to become. The apprentice frowned. But wood doesn't want anything. It's just wood. Li Wei set down his tools and looked at the young man with eyes that held the patience of old trees. "Watch," he said simply. He picked up a piece of bamboo and tried to bend it against its natural grain. The wood resisted, then snapped with a sharp crack. Then he took another piece and bent it gently with its grain. It curved gracefully, like a dancer following music. "The wood has its own nature," Li Wei explained. "Fighting that nature breaks it. Working with that nature makes it strong and beautiful. This is the middle way of craftsmanship. As you rest here, feel how this principle applies to your own life. 0. 5. How much energy have you spent fighting your own grain? Trying to force yourself to be someone you're not? Pushing against your natural rhythms and tendencies instead of learning to work skillfully with them? The middle way is not about becoming passive or giving up on growth. It's about understanding the difference between effort and struggle, between growth and force, between discipline and violence against yourself. Li Wei's workshop became a place of pilgrimage for other craftsmen, but not for the reasons they expected. They came expecting to learn techniques and secret methods. Instead, they found a man who worked with such naturalness that his labor seemed like play. One visitor, a famous cabinet maker from the capital, watched Li Wei for 3 days. Finally, he burst out in frustration. "But what do you do? I see you work, but you make it look effortless. Where is the struggle? Where is the great effort I've heard about?" Li Wei smiled and gestured to a tree growing outside his workshop window. "Do you see that oak tree struggling to grow? Do you see it forcing its branches toward the sun?" "No," the visitor admitted. "Yet it grows stronger each year. It bends with storms instead of breaking. It drops its leaves when winter comes and grows new ones in spring. It follows its nature completely, and in doing so, becomes magnificent." "But trees are different from people," the visitor protested. "Are they?" Li Wei asked. "What if humans are also part of nature? What if we too have a natural way of growing, of working, of being? What if the struggle comes from forgetting this?" Feel this question settling into your awareness. What if the difficulty in your life comes not from life being difficult, but from swimming against the current of your own nature? What if there's a way of living that feels more like flowing than fighting? The middle way that the Buddha taught is this natural approach to existence. It doesn't mean being lazy or uncommitted. It means finding the path of least resistance that still leads where you want to go. Like water, which is soft, yet wears away the hardest stone, not through force but through persistence. Li Wei had a student who exemplified the opposite approach. Chen was brilliant and ambitious, determined to become the greatest craftsman in all of China. He worked from before dawn until after dark. He pushed himself to exhaustion, believing that more effort always meant better results. One morning, Chen came to the workshop with his hands shaking from fatigue. He had been working on a delicate carving for weeks, but the harder he worked, the more mistakes he made. The wood kept splitting. His tools kept slipping. His frustration was so great that he threw his chisel across the room. "Master," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm trying so hard, but everything I touch turns to failure." Li Wei looked at his exhausted student with compassion. "Come," he said gently. "Let me tell you about the tea master who forgot himself. As your body continues to relax, Let this story wash over you like warm water. There was once a tea master named Rikyu who was invited to perform the tea ceremony for a gathering of important merchants. This was a great honor, and Rikyu spent days preparing. He practiced every gesture until it was perfect. He rehearsed every word until it flowed like poetry. He was determined to create the most exquisite tea ceremony anyone had ever witnessed. The day of the ceremony arrived. The merchants sat in the pristine tea house, waiting to be impressed. Rikyu began with movements that were technically flawless. Every gesture was precisely executed. Every word was perfectly chosen. And yet, something was wrong. The ceremony felt cold, mechanical, lifeless. The merchants shifted restlessly. The whole room felt tense. Halfway through, Rikyu realized what was happening. In his determination to be perfect, he had forgotten the most important element of the tea ceremony: presence. He was so focused on executing techniques that he had lost connection with the simple joy of sharing tea with others. In that moment, Rikyu made a choice that would be remembered for centuries. He stopped trying to impress anyone. He stopped performing and simply began serving tea. His movements became natural instead of perfect. His words became spontaneous instead of rehearsed. The change was immediate. The room filled with warmth. The merchants relaxed. What had been a performance became a communion. The ceremony, which had been flawless but empty, became simple but profound. Afterward, one of the merchants approached Rikyu. "Master," he said, "I have attended many tea ceremonies, but I have never experienced anything like what happened today. How did you create such magic?" Rikyu smiled. "I stopped trying to create anything. I simply allowed the tea ceremony to happen through me. This is the essence of the middle way, learning when to effort and when to allow, when to do and when to be, when to pursue and when to receive." Chen listened to this story in silence. Something in his heart began to soften. "But Master," he said finally, "how do I know when I'm trying too hard? How do I find this balance?" Li Wei picked up one of Chen's carvings, a piece the student had considered ruined. But as he turned it in the lamplight, Chen saw something he had missed. The mistakes had created unexpected patterns. The places where the wood had split revealed beautiful grain underneath. What he had seen as failure, his master saw as character. "The wood is teaching you," Li Wei said. "When you fight it, it breaks. When you listen to it, it guides you toward its hidden beauty. Your hands are wise when your mind stops interfering." "How do I quiet my mind?" Chen asked. "You don't quiet it," Li Wei replied. "You give it something worthy to focus on. Instead of thinking about the result, pay attention to this single cut. Instead of worrying about tomorrow's work, feel the tool in your hand right now. Instead of trying to be the greatest craftsman, simply be present with this piece of wood." This is how the middle way works in practice. Not through grand gestures or dramatic changes, but through bringing full attention to whatever you're doing right now. When you're fully present, effort becomes effortless. When you're completely here, you naturally find the balance between too much and too little. Let this understanding seep into your bones as you rest. You don't need to transform your entire life overnight. You just need to bring presence to this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this gentle settling into sleep. Chen began to practice what his master taught. Instead of working 18 hours a day, he worked 8 hours with complete attention. Instead of rushing through projects, he savored each cut, each joining, each finishing touch. Paradoxically, his work improved dramatically, and he finished projects faster than before. "How is this possible?" he asked Li Wei. "When you're not fighting yourself, all your energy goes toward creation instead of internal conflict. When you're not worried about results, you can give yourself fully to the process. When you trust the wood in your hands and this moment, miracles become ordinary." The middle way applies to every aspect of life. In work, it means full engagement without attachment to outcomes. In relationships, it means loving completely while allowing others their freedom. In spiritual practice, it means sincere effort without forcing experiences. In daily life, it means being fully where you are instead of always reaching towards somewhere else. There's a beautiful Zen story that illustrates this perfectly. A meditation student approached her teacher in frustration. "Master, I've been practicing for 3 years, but I still have not achieved enlightenment. My mind is as busy as ever. Should I meditate more hours each day? Should I fast? Should I retreat from the world completely?" The teacher smiled and led her to the monastery's vegetable garden. There, he pointed to 2 plants growing side by side. One was thriving, green and full. The other was small and struggling. "Tell me," the teacher said, "what is the difference between these plants?" The student examined them carefully. "They have the same soil, the same sun, the same water," she said. "I don't understand why one flourishes and the other struggles." "Look more closely," the teacher suggested. Finally, the student noticed it. Around the struggling plant, the soil had been packed tight, compressed, overtended. Around the thriving plant, the earth was loose and aerated. "Ah," she said with sudden understanding. "Too much care can be harmful." "Yes," the teacher nodded. The struggling plant received more attention, more intervention, more effort to make it grow. The thriving plant was simply given space to unfold according to its nature. "Are you saying I should stop trying?" the student asked. "I'm saying learn the difference between nurturing and forcing. Water your practice regularly, give it space to grow, trust its natural unfolding. But don't dig up the seeds every day to see if they're sprouting. Feel this wisdom applying to your own spiritual journey. You don't need to force awakening or manufacture peace. These are your natural states, temporarily obscured by trying too hard to find them. Like the plant that grows best when given space, your inner wisdom flourishes when you stop interfering with its natural expression. The middle way is not a destination, but a dynamic balance that must be found fresh in each moment. Sometimes it looks like more effort, sometimes like less. Sometimes it means saying yes, sometimes saying no. Sometimes it means engagement, sometimes withdrawal. The key is learning to sense what this moment requires rather than applying a rigid formula. Li Wei often told his students, the master carpenter doesn't use the same pressure for every type of wood. Soft pine requires a light touch. Hard oak needs firm pressure. Wisdom lies not in having one technique, but in sensing what each situation calls for. As you settle deeper into rest tonight, allow this sensing to develop in your own life. You already know more than you think you know. Your body knows when it needs rest and when it needs movement. Your heart knows when to open and when to protect itself. Your spirit knows when to strive and when to surrender. The middle way is about trusting this inner guidance rather than overriding it with shoulds and have-tos. It's about becoming fluent in the language of your own wisdom. There was once a potter whose work was renowned throughout the land. Students came from everywhere to learn his secrets. They expected to find complicated techniques and special tools. Instead, they found an old man who worked with such simplicity that his pottery seemed to create itself. "Master," one student asked, "how do you make such beautiful vessels?" The potter smiled and gestured to the spinning wheel. "I don't make the pottery," he said. "I simply remove everything that is not pottery." "I don't understand." "I center the clay, then allow its nature to emerge. I guide it, but I don't force it. I work with its tendencies rather than against them. The pot already exists within the clay. My job is simply to help it reveal itself." This is perhaps the deepest teaching of the middle way. Your true self already exists within you, perfect and complete. Life's purpose is not to create someone new, but to remove everything that obscures who you already are. Like the potter with clay, like the carpenter with wood, you can learn to work with your own nature rather than against it. The struggle ends when you stop trying to be someone you're not and start allowing yourself to be who you are. The purpose of life reveals itself when you stop asking what you should become and start discovering what you already are. Let this recognition settle into your heart now. You are not a project to be completed or a problem to be solved. You are a masterpiece in the process of revealing itself. And like all great art, this revelation happens not through force, but through the patient, gentle removal of everything that is not essentially you. Rest in this knowing. Trust this process. Allow this unfolding. The middle way is not something you do, it's something you allow. It's the natural balance that emerges when you stop fighting yourself and start dancing with life. As sleep comes to embrace you, know that you are walking this middle way perfectly right now. Not trying to sleep, not fighting wakefulness, simply allowing whatever arises to arise. This is the path. This is the practice. This is the way home to yourself. The ancient masters understood that our minds are like gardens. Sometimes wild and overgrown, sometimes carefully tended, always alive with possibility. The purpose of life, they discovered, is not to eliminate all the weeds or create some perfect landscape. It's to learn the art of gentle cultivation, knowing when to plant, when to water, when to prune, and when to simply sit quietly and enjoy what grows. Tonight, as your mind settles into the spaciousness of approaching sleep, we explore this inner gardening, the practice of mindfulness that transforms ordinary awareness into wisdom. In the mountains of old Japan, there lived a Zen master named Dogen who tended the most extraordinary garden anyone had ever seen. But what made it extraordinary was not its beauty, though it was beautiful. What amazed visitors was how perfectly everything seemed to belong exactly where it was. The rocks appeared to have chosen their own positions. The moss seemed to have arranged itself with artistic precision. Even the fallen leaves created patterns of such natural harmony that people hesitated to disturb them by walking through. Students came from distant temples to learn Dogen's secret. They expected to find special techniques for landscape design or rare knowledge about plants and stones. Instead, they found an old man who spent most of his time simply sitting in his garden, watching. "Master," One eager student asked, "How do you create such perfection? What tools do you use? What methods?" Dogen smiled and gestured to a cushion beside him. "Sit," he said, simply. "Watch with me." "But I want to learn how to garden," the student protested. "This is how to garden," Dogen replied. "First, you must learn to see what is already here. Feel this invitation extending to you now. You don't need to change anything about your current experience. You don't need to feel more relaxed or more spiritual or more anything. Simply practice seeing what is already here, the breath that breathes itself, the awareness that notices without effort, the peace that exists even in the midst of mental activity." The student sat reluctantly beside the master, fidgeting with impatience. His mind raced with plans and ideas. He imagined the garden he would create when he learned these secrets. He compared this garden to others he had seen. He wondered how long this observation would take. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, the student burst out, "Master, I've been watching, but nothing is happening. When do we start the real work?" Dogen turned to him with eyes that held the patience of mountains. "What do you see when you look at that stone?" The student glanced at the large granite boulder Dogen was indicating. "I see a stone. Grey granite, probably placed there for visual balance." "Look again. This time, don't look with your ideas about how gardens should be designed. Don't look with your knowledge about stones. Just look." The student tried to follow this instruction, but his mind kept interfering. He saw the stone, but he also saw his thoughts about the stone, his judgments, his comparisons, his theories about its purpose. "I'm sorry, Master. I don't understand what you want me to see." "I don't want you to see anything in particular," Dogen said gently. "I want you to notice what happens when you try to see without wanting. This is the beginning of mindfulness, learning to observe without immediately grasping or pushing away. Like the student in the garden, most of us have forgotten how to simply be present with what is. We look at our lives through filters of should and shouldn't, like and dislike, past and future. But underneath all these mental habits, there is a simpler way of being. A natural awareness that notices everything without being disturbed by anything. This awareness is like the sky, vast enough to hold all weather without being changed by storms or clouds. As you rest here now, practice this sky-like awareness. Notice the thoughts that come and go, but don't get caught up in their content. Notice the sensations in your body, but don't judge them as good or bad. Notice the sounds around you, but let them arise and pass without resistance. The student continued to sit with Master Dogen day after day. Gradually, something began to shift in his perception. Instead of looking at the garden, he began to feel himself as part of it. Instead of observing from outside, he started experiencing from within. One morning, as he sat in his usual spot, a leaf fell from the maple tree above them. As he watched it spiral down and land softly on the moss, something in his mind became very quiet. For just a moment, there was no observer and no observed. There was just the falling leaf, the morning air, the presence of awareness itself. "Master," he whispered, tears forming in his eyes, "I think I'm beginning to understand." Dogen nodded. "The garden has been teaching you all along. You were just learning its language." "What language is that?" "The language of presence, of things being exactly as they are. of beauty that requires no improvement. This is what mindfulness practice reveals, that life is continuously offering its wisdom, but we're usually too busy thinking about life to actually experience it. Like the student who had to learn to see the garden fresh, we can learn to experience our own lives without the overlay of constant mental commentary. Dogen then shared with his student the practice that had transformed his own understanding. Each morning, he said, I come to this garden not to make it beautiful, but to practice being beautiful myself. Not to create harmony, but to discover the harmony that already exists. I sit here and breathe with the trees. I listen with the stones. I am still with the still water and moving with the moving clouds. How do you do that? The student asked. I practice what we call just sitting, shikantaza. I sit completely, breathe completely, exist completely, without trying to get anywhere else or become anyone else. In this complete sitting, I discover that there is nowhere else to go and no one else to become. Let your own body practice this complete resting now. You're not resting in order to fall asleep, though sleep may come. You're not relaxing in order to feel better, though you may feel better. You're simply allowing yourself to be completely present with this moment of existing. The practice of just sitting reveals something profound about the nature of mind. When we stop trying to control our thoughts and emotions, when we stop trying to create particular states of consciousness, a natural peace emerges. Not a peace we achieve, but a peace we recognize was always here. Master Dogen had another student, a woman named Ido, who struggled with what she called her monkey mind. Her thoughts jumped from branch to branch like a restless primate, never settling anywhere for long. Master, she complained one day, my meditation is a disaster. I sit down to be peaceful, and immediately my mind becomes a circus. Thoughts are swinging everywhere. How can I make them stop? Dogen smiled and pointed to an actual monkey that was playing in the trees above them. Do you see that monkey? Yes. Are you angry with it for being a monkey? Of course not. It's just doing what monkeys do. Exactly. And your mind is just doing what minds do. Thinking is as natural to the mind as swinging is to a monkey. The mistake is believing you should be in control of it. But then, how do I find peace? Peace is not the absence of monkey mind. Peace is the awareness that watches monkey mind without getting upset about it. You are not the monkey. You are the awareness in which the monkey plays. This understanding transforms everything about meditation and mindfulness practice. You're not trying to stop thoughts or eliminate emotions. You're learning to rest as the awareness that notices thoughts and emotions without being identified with them. It's like learning to watch a movie without getting lost in the story. You can enjoy the drama, feel moved by the emotions, appreciate the artistry, all while knowing that you are not actually the characters on the screen. You are the witnessing presence in which the whole movie appears. Ido practiced this perspective daily. She would sit in the garden and watch her mind like she was watching clouds pass through the sky. Some thoughts were dark and stormy. Some were light and cheerful. Some seemed to carry important messages. Others were just mental debris, random fragments with no particular meaning. Gradually, she stopped taking her thoughts so seriously. She began to see them as visitors passing through awareness rather than as fundamental truths about reality. And in that shift of perspective, she found the peace that had always been there, not as something she created, but as something she stopped obscuring. "Master," she said one day, "I think I understand now. I was like a person standing in sunlight, but staring at her shadow, wondering why everything seemed dark." "Yes," Dogen replied. Mindfulness is simply turning around to face the sun. This practice of mindful awareness extends far beyond formal sitting meditation. It becomes a way of living, a way of meeting each moment with presence rather than preoccupation. When you eat, you can practice eating completely, tasting the actual flavors instead of thinking about nutrition or calories or what you'll eat next. When you walk, you can practice walking completely, feeling your feet on the ground, your body moving through space, the air on your skin. When you listen to someone, you can practice listening completely, hearing not just their words, but the feelings beneath the words, the humanity in their voice. This complete engagement with ordinary activities reveals something extraordinary. Life stops being a series of tasks to get through and becomes a continuous opportunity for presence. Work becomes meditation in action. Relationships become opportunities for compassion. Even difficulties become teachers offering lessons in wisdom. There was once a tea master named Sen no Rikyu who elevated this ordinary mindfulness to an art form. When he prepared tea, every movement was deliberate yet natural. When he arranged flowers, each stem seemed to find its perfect position effortlessly. When he swept his tea house, the very act of cleaning became a form of prayer. Students would watch him in amazement. How could such simple activities be so beautiful to witness? One student finally asked, "Master Rikyu, what is the secret of your way?" "There is no secret," Rikyu replied, continuing to whisk the tea with perfect attention. "I just do one thing at a time, completely. But everyone does one thing at a time." "No," Rikyu said gently. "Most people do many things at once. Their body performs one action while their mind is somewhere else entirely. They wash dishes while planning tomorrow's activities. They drink tea while reviewing yesterday's mistakes. They are everywhere except where they actually are. Feel how this applies to this very moment. Are you here completely, allowing yourself to rest and receive these words? Or is part of your attention elsewhere, planning, reviewing, anticipating? There's no judgment either way. Simply notice where your awareness actually is. Rikyu continued, "When I whisk tea, I am completely present with whisking tea. When I bow, I am completely present with bowing. When I sit in silence, I am completely present with silence." This complete presence transforms ordinary activities into sacred acts. How do you develop such presence? The student asked. "Practice," Rikyu replied simply. "And patience with yourself when you forget to practice. The mind wanders because that is its nature." Mindfulness is not about preventing the wandering. It's about noticing when it happens and gently returning to here, now, this. This gentleness with yourself is crucial. Mindfulness is not a discipline in the sense of forcing yourself to behave differently. It's more like learning to befriend your own experience. You develop a kind, curious relationship with whatever arises in your awareness. When you notice your mind has wandered into worry, you don't scold yourself. You simply acknowledge, worrying is happening, and return your attention to the present moment. When you catch yourself lost in fantasy, you don't judge it as wrong. You simply note, Fantasizing is here, and gently come back to what's actually happening now. This practice is revolutionary because it stops the war against yourself. Instead of fighting your human tendency to get distracted or emotional or reactive, you learn to work with these tendencies skillfully. You become like a wise gardener who knows that some weather is stormy and some is sunny, and who tends the garden with equal care through all seasons. As you continue to settle deeper into rest, let this self-compassion infuse your relaxation. You don't need to relax perfectly. You don't need to have the right thoughts or the right feelings or the right anything. You can rest imperfectly, think chaotically, feel whatever you feel, and still be practicing mindfulness. The master gardener Dogen often told his students, "The purpose of tending a garden is not to eliminate wildness, but to create harmony between cultivation and nature." Some plants grow where you plant them. Others grow where they choose to grow. Wisdom lies in knowing which is which. In the garden of your own mind, some thoughts respond to gentle guidance. Others seem to have a life of their own. Some emotions can be influenced by your attention and intention. Others need to run their course like storms that must pass through. Mindfulness teaches you to work skillfully with both kinds. With some experiences, you can apply gentle effort, returning your attention to the breath when it wanders, choosing to focus on what's helpful rather than what's harmful. With other experiences, you practice what Zen calls non-resistance, allowing difficult emotions to move through you without fighting them, letting busy thoughts exhaust themselves naturally. This balance between effort and allowing, between cultivation and acceptance, is itself the middle way applied to the practice of awareness. You care for your mind like a garden, but you don't try to control it like a machine. There's a beautiful story that illustrates this perfectly. A monk was troubled by persistent, angry thoughts. Every time he sat to meditate, rage would arise in his mind like a fire. He tried everything to eliminate these thoughts: concentration techniques, visualization practices, breathing exercises. Nothing worked. The anger kept returning. Finally, he went to his teacher. "Master," he said, "I am a failure at meditation. I cannot control my mind. Angry thoughts arise constantly. Perhaps I am not suited for this practice." The teacher listened compassionately, then led the monk to a field where farmers were burning rice stubble after harvest. Smoke filled the air. The smell was acrid. The scene looked chaotic and destructive. "Tell me," the teacher said, "what do you see?" "I see farmers destroying their fields with fire." "Look more carefully." The monk watched longer. Gradually, he began to understand. The fire was not destroying the field, it was preparing it for new growth. The farmers were burning away the old stubble to make room for fresh planting. What looked like destruction was actually renewal. "Ah," the monk said quietly, "the anger is not my enemy. It's burning away something old to make space for something new." "Yes," the teacher said. "Don't try to stop the fire. Let it burn completely, but don't add fuel to it. Don't resist it, but don't feed it either. Simply watch it do its work." This is advanced mindfulness, learning to be present even with difficult experiences without getting caught up in stories about them. The anger arises not because you're a bad person, but because you're human. The worry appears not because something is wrong with you, but because you care about life. The sadness comes not as punishment, but as a natural response to loss and change. When you can hold all these experiences in the spacious awareness of mindfulness, they become teachers rather than tormentors. They show you where you're attached, where you're afraid, where you're clinging to illusions about how life should be. And in showing you these things, they offer opportunities for greater freedom. As you rest here now in the garden of this moment, practice this spacious holding. Whatever thoughts arise, let them be like clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. Whatever emotions surface, let them be like weather moving through the landscape of your heart. Whatever sensations appear in your body, let them be like waves arising and dissolving in the ocean of your being. You are not any of these temporary experiences. You are the awareness in which they all appear and disappear. This awareness is never disturbed, never damaged, never depleted by what passes through it. It is your true home, your natural state, your deepest identity. This is not about giving up or becoming passive. This is about discovering the freedom that comes when you stop carrying what was never yours to carry. Like a river that flows effortlessly to the sea, not because it doesn't care where it's going, but because it trusts the landscape to guide it home. In the mountains of Tibet, there lived a monk named Tenzin who carried the heaviest burden anyone had ever seen. Not a physical burden, his possessions fit into a single small bag. His burden was invisible but crushing. He carried the weight of every mistake he had ever made, every opportunity he had missed, every person he felt he had failed. Every morning, Tenzin would wake with his heart heavy as stone. Every evening, he would lie down feeling as though he had failed yet again. He meditated faithfully, studied the teachings diligently, served others generously. But the weight only seemed to grow heavier with each passing year. One day, an old wanderer arrived at the monastery. He was ancient beyond counting, his eyes holding depths that seemed to reflect eternity itself. He carried nothing except a walking stick worn smooth by countless miles. "Master," Tenzin said, bowing deeply, "you have traveled far. You must be exhausted from carrying your belongings such a great distance." The old wanderer looked puzzled. "What belongings?" Tenzin gestured to the man's walking stick. "Your possessions. Your supplies for the journey." The wanderer laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "My dear friend, this stick is not a possession. It's a companion. When I need it, it supports me. When I don't need it, I barely notice it's there. It carries no weight because I carry no attachment to it." "But how do you survive with so little? 0, 5, Tenzin asked. "How do you survive with so much?" The wanderer replied, looking directly into Tenzin's eyes. "I can see the mountain you carry on your shoulders. Tell me, what is in your invisible pack?" Feel how this question touches your own heart. What invisible weight have you been carrying? What burdens have you picked up along the way that were never meant to be yours? That evening, the old wanderer sat with Tenzin by the monastery's meditation hall. "Tell me about this weight you carry," he said gently. And so Tenzin began to unpack his invisible burden. The harsh words he had spoken to his sister 20 years ago. The promise he had broken to his teacher. The times he had felt angry during meditation and judged himself as a failure. The fear that he would never be wise enough, kind enough, good enough. With each item he named, the wanderer simply nodded with infinite compassion. He didn't offer advice or judgment or solutions. He simply listened with the presence of someone who had learned to hear without needing to fix. When Tenzin finished, They sat in silence as the stars emerged above them. Finally, the wanderer spoke. "My friend, you have been carrying things that don't belong to you." "What do you mean?" "You are carrying your sister's anger as if it were yours. You are carrying your teacher's disappointment as if it defined you. You are carrying expectations about how awakening should look, as if there were a right way to be human. None of these things are yours to carry." The wanderer picked up a stone from the ground. "If I asked you to carry this stone to the next village, would you do it?" "Of course, if you needed me to." "And what if I asked you to carry it for the rest of your life?" Tenzin frowned. "That would be a very heavy burden." "Yes. Now, what if I told you that the stone was never yours to carry, that I had been mistaken when I asked you to pick it up? What would you do?" "I would put it down immediately." "Exactly. So, why do you continue to carry stones that no one ever asked you to pick up?" This is the beginning of true letting go, recognizing that most of what we carry is not actually ours. We pick up guilt that belongs to others. We carry responsibility for outcomes we cannot control. We hold on to pain long after the original wound has healed, like continuing to treat a cut that is no longer there. As you rest here now, practice this recognition. What would it feel like to set down the burden of needing to be perfect? What would it feel like to release the weight of past mistakes? What would it feel like to stop carrying tomorrow's worries today? The wanderer continued his teaching through the night. "There is a difference," he said, "between caring and carrying. You can care deeply about your sister's happiness without carrying responsibility for her anger. You can honor your teacher's guidance without carrying the weight of his expectations. You can work toward awakening without carrying the burden of spiritual achievement." "How do I learn this difference?" Tenzin asked. "By practicing what I call the art of open hands. Watch." The wanderer held out his hands, palms open to the sky. Open hands can give and receive freely. They can hold what needs to be held and release what needs to be released. But closed fists. He clenched his hands into fists. Closed fists can neither give nor receive. They hold on to everything, even things that cause pain. Feel your own hands as you rest. Notice whether they are clenched or relaxed. Let them soften completely, palms open, fingers naturally curved. This physical letting go can teach your heart how to release what it's been grasping. The whole universe operates with open hands, the wanderer said. The sun gives its light freely without demanding payment. The earth receives rain without grasping. Trees release their leaves in autumn without grief. Even your breath knows this wisdom, holding each inhalation just long enough before releasing it completely. There was once a tea master who had collected the most exquisite tea bowls in all of Japan. Each one was a masterpiece, valued not just for its beauty, but for its history. He kept them in a special room, locked away where they could never be damaged or stolen. One day, a student visited and asked to see the famous collection. The master proudly unlocked the room and showed the bowls, each one perfect and pristine. "They are beautiful," the student said. "May I hold one?" "Oh no," the master said quickly. "They are far too precious. They might break." "But master," the student said gently, "if they can never be used, are they really tea bowls? Or are they just decorative objects that happen to be shaped like tea bowls?" The master was taken aback. "I, never thought of it that way." "You have preserved their physical form perfectly," the student continued, "but you have killed their essential nature. A tea bowl's purpose is not to be safe. It's to participate in the tea ceremony. It's to be filled and emptied, to be warmed by tea and cooled by air, to be part of the flow of life." That evening, the master sat in meditation, deeply troubled. He realized he had been doing the same thing with his own life that he had done with his tea bowls. He had been so afraid of being hurt, so protective of his image as a wise teacher, so careful to avoid mistakes, that he had stopped fully participating in life. The next day, he unlocked the room and brought out his most precious bowl. His hands trembled as he prepared tea in it, knowing it might be chipped or broken. But as he shared that tea with his student, the bowl came alive in a way it never had while locked away. It fulfilled its true nature not through being preserved, but through being used. This is what the art of letting go reveals, that security comes not from protecting ourselves from life, but from trusting ourselves to life. That safety is found not in controlling outcomes, but in knowing we can meet whatever comes with presence and wisdom. As you settle deeper into rest, practice this trust. You don't need to figure out tomorrow tonight. You don't need to solve problems that haven't arisen. You don't need to carry the whole world on your shoulders. Life is wise enough to unfold without your constant management. The wanderer taught Tenzin a simple practice that transformed his understanding completely. Each evening, he said, before you sleep, practice the ritual of emptying your pockets. I don't understand. Throughout the day, you pick up things that aren't yours. Worry about others' opinions. Guilt about things you cannot change. Anger about past events. Anxiety about future possibilities. Before sleep, empty these out like you would empty coins from your pockets. How do I do that? Name what you're carrying, thank it for trying to protect you, and set it down. Say, thank you, worry about tomorrow, for trying to keep me safe. I don't need to carry you tonight. Say, thank you, guilt about yesterday, for trying to make me a better person. I can learn from the past without carrying it into sleep. Feel this practice working in your own experience right now. What have you been carrying from today that you can set down? What concerns from tomorrow can you trust to tomorrow? What regrets from the past can you finally release into the care of compassion? 0. 5. Tenzin practiced this ritual faithfully. Night after night, he would sit quietly and unpack his invisible burden. At first, the same worries and guilts would return the next day. But gradually, he began to notice which items in his pack were actually useful and which were just dead weight. He realized that caring about his sister was love, but carrying her anger was not helping either of them. He understood that learning from his mistakes was wisdom, but punishing himself endlessly was just cruelty. He saw that working toward awakening was beautiful, but demanding it on his timeline was just another form of attachment. "Master," he said to the wanderer one evening, "I'm beginning to understand. Letting go is not about stopping caring. It's about caring without clinging." "Yes," the wanderer smiled. "It's about loving with open hands instead of closed fists. About being fully present with what is here now instead of fighting what was or reaching for what might be." There's an ancient Zen story that illustrates this perfectly. 2 monks were walking to their monastery when they came to a river swollen by recent rains. At the riverbank, they found a young woman in fine silk robes, clearly distressed because she could not cross without ruining her clothes. Without hesitation, the older monk lifted the woman onto his back and carried her safely across. On the other side, she thanked him gracefully and went on her way. The two monks continued their journey in silence. But as they walked, the younger monk became increasingly agitated. Finally, just as they reached their monastery gates, he could contain himself no longer. "Brother," he burst out, "how could you touch that woman? You know our vows forbid contact with women. How could you carry her like that?" The older monk looked at him with surprise. "I put that woman down at the riverbank an hour ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This is the essence of letting go, learning to set down what you've picked up when its time of usefulness has passed. The older monk's action was skillful compassion in the moment. He helped someone in need, then released the experience completely. The younger monk turned a moment of service into a burden of judgment that he carried long after the action was complete. Feel how this applies to your own experience. How many things are you still carrying that you set down long ago? How many conversations are you still having in your mind with people who aren't present? How many problems are you still solving that were resolved hours or days or years ago? The art of letting go is also the art of timing. Like a farmer who knows when to plant and when to harvest, we can learn when to hold on and when to let go. Some things need to be carried for a while, like love for family, like commitment to growth, like responsibility for our actions. Other things are meant to be temporary, like emotions, like circumstances, like thoughts. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. The wanderer shared one final teaching with Tenzin before departing. "The greatest freedom," he said, "comes from realizing that you are not your experiences. You are the awareness in which experiences arise and pass away. Experiences come and go like visitors in your home. Some are welcome, some are not. But you are not the visitors. You are the spacious house that can welcome all visitors without being changed by any of them." "Even difficult visitors?" Tenzin asked. "Even difficult visitors. Pain comes to teach you about healing. Fear comes to show you where you need courage. Anger comes to reveal what you truly value. Sadness comes to deepen your capacity for joy. When you stop fighting these visitors and start learning from them, they don't need to stay so long. This understanding transforms everything about how we relate to difficult experiences. Instead of seeing challenging emotions as enemies to defeat, we can see them as messengers carrying important information. Instead of trying to avoid all pain, we can learn to move through it with grace. Instead of demanding that life be comfortable, we can find peace even in discomfort. As you rest here now, practice being the spacious awareness rather than the temporary experiences moving through it. You are not your worries. You are the peace that notices worrying. You are not your tiredness. You are the rest that receives fatigue. You are not your thoughts. You are the silence in which thoughts appear and disappear. The art of letting go is ultimately the art of coming home to yourself. Home to the awareness that was never lost. Home to the peace that was never disturbed. Home to the love that never left. When you know yourself as this unchanging presence, letting go becomes natural. Not because you stop caring, but because you care from a place of wholeness rather than need. Not because you become detached, but because you love without attachment. This is the deepest freedom, to live fully without grasping, to care completely without clinging, to participate wholeheartedly in the dance of life, while knowing that you are both the dancer and the space in which the dancing happens. Let this freedom infuse your rest tonight. You are already free. You have always been free. The chains you thought bound, you were made of thoughts and beliefs, not iron and steel. And thoughts, as you now know, are just visitors passing through the vast sky of your being. Rest in this sky-like awareness. Let everything else come and go like clouds. You are home. In the remote mountains of ancient China, there lived a hermit monk named Master Yunmen, who had spent 30 years in solitary meditation. His cave was carved into the side of a cliff, accessible only by a narrow mountain path that few dared to climb. For 3 decades, he had practiced with fierce dedication, believing that through complete isolation from the world, he would finally achieve the enlightenment that had eluded him. Every morning, Yunmen would rise before dawn and sit in perfect posture, watching his breath, observing his thoughts, cultivating states of deep concentration. Every evening, he would study the ancient texts by candlelight, memorizing the words of the great masters who had walked this path before him. His life was ordered, disciplined, pure. Yet despite all his years of practice, despite his mastery of meditation techniques and his vast knowledge of Buddhist philosophy, something essential remained missing. He felt like a man dying of thirst who had spent decades studying the chemical composition of water but had never taken a drink. One winter morning, as snow fell softly outside his cave, Yunmen heard something that stopped his meditation completely. It was the sound of crying, human crying, distant but unmistakable. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. He had renounced the world of human suffering precisely to avoid such distractions from his spiritual practice. But something in the quality of the crying touched a place in his heart that 30 years of meditation had not hardened. He rose from his cushion, wrapped his thin robe around his shoulders, and ventured out into the snow. Following the sound down the treacherous mountain path, he discovered a young woman sitting beside a partially frozen stream. She was poorly dressed for the mountain cold, her thin clothes soaked through from the snow. Beside her lay an elderly man, clearly her father, unconscious and barely breathing. "Please," she said when she saw Yunmen approaching, "my father collapsed on the path. We were trying to reach the village below before the storm, but we became lost. I don't know what to do." Yunmen looked at the scene before him. His first thought was of his meditation schedule, his carefully maintained routine of spiritual practice. His second thought was of the Buddhist precepts about non-attachment, about not becoming entangled in worldly concerns. But then he looked into the young woman's eyes, and something happened that 3 decades of isolated practice had not prepared him for. The boundary between his suffering and her suffering simply dissolved. The pain in her heart was not separate from the awareness observing it. The fear for her father's life was not happening to someone else. It was arising in the same consciousness that had been sitting on his meditation cushion moments before. Without another thought, Yunmen lifted the old man onto his back and began the difficult journey down the mountain. The woman walked beside him, and though neither spoke, there was a quality of presence between them that felt more sacred than any meditation he had ever experienced. They reached the village as the storm intensified. Yunmen helped get the old man to a warm shelter and medical care. The daughter wept with gratitude, trying to thank him, but Yunmen found he had no sense of having done anything special. It had felt as natural as breathing, as automatic as the heart beating in his chest. As he climbed back up the mountain to his cave, something had fundamentally shifted in his understanding. For 30 years, he had been practicing to transcend suffering, to rise above the messiness of human existence, to achieve a state of consciousness untouched by the pain of the world. But in that moment of responding to another's need, he had discovered something far more profound than transcendence. He had discovered that there was no other to transcend from. The suffering he had been trying to escape was not separate from the awareness trying to escape it. The enlightenment he had been seeking was not somewhere else. It was the very consciousness that was capable of responding to suffering with love. That night, sitting again in his cave, Yunmen understood why all his years of practice had felt incomplete. He had been using meditation as a way to maintain separation from the world, from other people, from the full spectrum of human experience. He had been seeking a private salvation, a personal enlightenment that would lift him above the conditions of ordinary life. But true awakening, he now realized, was not about transcending the human condition. It was about recognizing that there was no separate self that could be saved from it. The one who sought liberation and the world he sought liberation from were both appearances in the same awareness. From that day forward, Yunmen's practice changed completely. Instead of meditating in isolation, he opened his cave to any traveler who needed shelter. Instead of studying texts about compassion, he simply responded to whatever suffering appeared before him. Instead of trying to achieve some special state of consciousness, he learned to recognize the consciousness that was already present in every moment of ordinary awareness. Word of the hermit, who had become a refuge, spread throughout the region. People climbed the difficult mountain path not to receive teachings about enlightenment, but simply to be in the presence of someone who had discovered that enlightenment was not separate from caring for others. One day, a young monk climbed to Yunmen's cave with a question that had been troubling him. "Master," he said, "I have been practicing meditation for 5 years, but I still feel separate from everything around me. How do I overcome this sense of isolation and realize the unity that the teachings speak of?" Yunmen smiled and handed the young monk a cup of tea. "Tell me," he said, "who is asking this question?" "I am," the monk replied. "And who is listening to the answer?" "I am." "And who is breathing while we speak?" "I am." "Show me this I that does all these things." The young monk sat in silence, looking within himself for the solid sense of self that seemed so obvious a moment before. But the more he searched, the more elusive it became. There were thoughts arising and passing away. There were sensations coming and going. There were emotions flowing like weather through the sky of awareness. But nowhere could he find a solid, separate self that was having these experiences. I can't find it," he whispered. "Exactly," Yunmen said gently. "The one who feels separate doesn't exist. There is no one to be united with anything else. There is only this seamless experiencing, temporarily imagining itself to be divided into experiencer and experience. Now, as you rest here in the deepening quiet of this night, let this understanding settle into your own awareness. The sense that you are separate from life, that you are a conscious being observing a world outside yourself, is the most persistent and convincing illusion of human experience. It's also the source of all seeking, all suffering, all the desperate attempts to find meaning and purpose and happiness. But what if this separation never actually existed? What if the boundaries between inner and outer, self and world, are like lines drawn on water, apparently real, but actually nowhere to be found. This is perhaps the most radical insight about life's true purpose. We spend our lives trying to connect with something we were never actually separate from. We seek unity with existence while mistaking ourselves for something outside of existence. We chase experiences of oneness while never recognizing that experience itself is already one seamless happening. The suffering that drives all our seeking comes from this fundamental misunderstanding about what we are. We take ourselves to be isolated fragments of consciousness, separate from the world we perceive. From this imagined position of separation, life becomes a problem to be solved, a gap to be bridged, a loneliness to be healed. But consciousness is not something you have, it's something you are. And this consciousness is not personal or private. It's the same awareness that has been looking out through every pair of eyes, thinking every thought, feeling every emotion that has ever arisen in the history of life on this planet. The wave is not separate from the ocean. The cloud is not separate from the sky. The thought is not separate from the mind. And you, this sense of being a conscious presence experiencing life, are not separate from life itself. This recognition doesn't require special practices or altered states of consciousness. It's available right now in the simple awareness that is reading these words. The consciousness that notices thoughts is not a thought. The awareness that observes emotions is not an emotion. The presence that witnesses experiences is not limited by any particular experience. When Yunmen found himself naturally responding to the young woman's distress, he wasn't performing some spiritual feat. He was simply acting from the recognition that her suffering and his consciousness were not two separate things. The compassion that arose was not his compassion directed towards someone else. It was life caring for itself through the temporary focal point of his human form. This is why the great Zen masters often pointed to ordinary activities as the highest spiritual expression. Washing dishes, feeding the hungry, comforting the grieving, these are not distractions from enlightenment. They are enlightenment expressing itself naturally when the illusion of separation dissolves. The real purpose of life is not to escape the human condition, but to recognize that there is no separate self that could escape from anything. It's not to achieve some special state of consciousness, but to acknowledge the consciousness that is already aware of all states. It's not to transcend the world, but to discover that transcendence and immanence are the same recognition seen from different angles. Feel this recognition touching your own experience now. You are not a separate being having experiences. You are experience itself, temporarily organized into the pattern we call a human life. The awareness reading these words is not contained within the boundaries of your body. It's the very space in which the sense of having a body appears. This understanding brings profound relief. The burden of being a separate self, responsible for finding meaning and purpose and happiness in an indifferent universe, simply drops away. What remains is not emptiness but fullness, the recognition that you are the fullness itself, appearing as this particular perspective on existence. The seeking ends not because you find what you were looking for, but because you recognize that the seeker and the sought were never two. The spiritual journey continues not as a quest for something missing, but as the natural expression of wholeness celebrating its own infinite creativity. Rest in this wholeness now. Let the illusion of separation dissolve like mist in the morning sun. You are not alone in the universe. You are the universe, temporarily experiencing itself through the beautiful specificity of this human form. This is the deepest purpose of life. not to become something you're not, but to recognize what you've always been. Not to unite with existence, but to stop imagining you were ever apart from it. Not to find your way home, but to realize you never left. Your body has found its perfect stillness now, like a lake at dawn before the first breeze stirs its surface. Each breath carries you deeper into the peace that has no opposite, the rest that needs no sleep to complete it. As we continue exploring life's deepest purpose, we discover how understanding our true nature naturally blossoms into compassion, not as something we practice, but as something we simply are. In the bustling city of Edo, during Japan's Golden Age, there lived a rice merchant named Taro, who was known throughout the district for his fairness and generosity. His shop was small and modest, squeezed between larger, more prosperous businesses, yet people traveled from distant neighborhoods to buy from him. What made Taro different was not the quality of his rice, though it was excellent, or his prices, though they were fair. What drew people to his shop was something harder to name, a quality of presence that made everyone who entered feel somehow lighter, more at peace with themselves. Taro had not always been this way. In his younger years, he had been ambitious and calculating, determined to build the largest rice business in Edo. He worked from before sunrise until long after sunset, constantly scheming new ways to expand his profits and outmaneuver his competitors. He measured his worth by the weight of coins in his strongbox and the envy in his rivals' eyes. The change began on a particularly difficult winter when rice became scarce throughout the region. While other merchants raised their prices dramatically, hoarding their supplies to maximize profit, Taro found himself faced with a decision that would alter the course of his life. An old woman came to his shop one gray morning, her grandson clutching her thin hand. The boy could not have been more than 7 years old, his cheeks hollow from hunger, his eyes holding the peculiar brightness that comes from eating too little for too long. "Please, sir," the woman said, bowing deeply, "I have only enough coins for half a measure of rice. I know it is not enough, but my grandson has not eaten properly in 3 days. Is there any kindness you might show us?" Taro looked at the meager coins in her weathered palm, then at the child's face. For a moment, he hesitated. His business mind calculated the loss, the precedent this might set, the impact on his carefully planned profits. But then something else stirred in his chest, something he had not felt in years of focused ambition. Without speaking, he filled not 1 but 3 measures of rice, wrapped them carefully, and placed them in the woman's basket. When she tried to protest, tried to explain again that she had insufficient money, Taro simply shook his head. "The rice knows no difference between full payment and empty pockets," he said quietly. "It only knows how to nourish." As the woman and child left his shop, something unprecedented happened to Taro. Instead of feeling the sting of lost profit, instead of regretting his impulsive generosity, he felt a warmth in his chest that seemed to expand with each breath. It was as if he had been carrying a heavy stone for years without realizing it, and had suddenly set it down. That night, Taro sat in his shop after closing, trying to understand what had changed. He had given away rice worth nearly a day's profit, yet he felt richer than he had in months. He had acted against his careful business calculations, yet he felt more successful than any profitable transaction had ever made him feel. Over the following weeks, similar situations arose. A sick mother needing rice for her children. An elderly man whose pension had run short. A young couple struggling to feed their newborn. Each time, Taro found himself responding not from calculation, but from something deeper, a recognition that their hunger was somehow not separate from his own capacity to help. Word spread through the neighborhood about the rice merchant who never turned away the truly needy. Some of his competitors mocked him as foolish, predicting that such soft-heartedness would lead to bankruptcy. Other merchants watched carefully, expecting his business to fail, planning to divide his customers among themselves. Instead, something miraculous happened. As Taro's reputation for kindness grew, so did his business. People who could afford full price began choosing his shop not just for the rice, but for the atmosphere of genuine care that pervaded the small space. Customers lingered to chat with him about their lives, their worries, their small joys. His shop became not just a place of commerce, but a gathering place for the community. More importantly, Taro himself was transforming. The driven, anxious merchant who had measured success only in monetary terms began to discover a different kind of wealth. Each act of generosity seemed to expand his capacity for more generosity. Each moment of caring for others revealed new depths of caring within himself. One evening, as he was preparing to close his shop, Taro was visited by a traveling monk who had heard stories of the kind rice merchant. The monk was old and walked with a stick, his robe simple and well-mended. "I have heard," the monk said, "that you give rice to those who cannot pay. People say you are either very holy or very foolish. Which is it?" Taro considered this question seriously. "I don't know about holy or foolish," he replied. "I only know that when I see hunger, something in me responds naturally, like water flowing downhill. I don't think about whether to be generous. The generosity just happens." "And why do you think that is?" Taro was quiet for a long moment, looking at the neat rows of rice sacks in his shop. "At first, I thought I was helping other people. But now I think maybe there are no other people. When I see that hungry child, it's like seeing my own hunger reflected in a mirror. When I feed him, it's like feeding myself." The monk smiled, his eyes twinkling with recognition. "You have discovered something that many spiritual seekers spend lifetimes trying to understand." "What is that?" "That compassion is not something you do. It's something you are. When the illusion of separation dissolves, caring for others is as natural as your right hand caring for your left hand." The monk stayed that night in the small room above Taro's shop. As they shared a simple meal of rice and vegetables, he told Taro about the nature of true compassion. "Most people," the monk explained, "think compassion means feeling sorry for others and trying to help them from a position of strength or superiority. But real compassion is not based on difference. It's based on recognition. When you truly see that there is no fundamental separation between yourself and others, helping becomes as automatic as breathing." "But how did this understanding come to me?" Taro asked. "I never studied spiritual teachings or practiced meditation. The heart has its own way of awakening," the monk replied. "Sometimes it happens through years of disciplined practice. Sometimes it happens through a single moment of genuine caring. Your business became your monastery. Each hungry person who entered your shop was your teacher. Each act of generosity was your meditation." That night, Taro understood that his life had found its true purpose not through the pursuit of wealth or status, but through the simple recognition that all beings shared the same fundamental nature. His rice shop was not just a business, it was an expression of this recognition made manifest in daily life. years passed. Taro's reputation for kindness spread throughout Edo and beyond. Other merchants began to emulate his approach, discovering that business built on genuine care was both more profitable and more fulfilling than business built on competition and greed. When Taro finally grew old and passed his business to his son, his last words were not about profit margins or business strategy. Instead, he said simply, "Remember that every person who enters this shop is yourself in a different form. Feed them as you would feed yourself. Care for them as you would care for yourself. This is not charity, this is recognition. Now, as you rest here in the gathering stillness of night, let this story touch something deep within your own heart." Taro's transformation reveals a profound truth about life's real purpose. We often think of compassion as something we should cultivate, a virtue we should develop, a practice we should engage in. But true compassion is not an action we perform, it's a recognition we embody. When we understand that there is no fundamental separation between ourselves and others, caring becomes as natural as the heart beating in our chest. We don't have to force ourselves to be kind any more than we have to force ourselves to feel pain when our own finger is cut. This is why the great spiritual traditions speak of compassion not as a moral imperative, but as a natural consequence of wisdom. When you truly see what you are, not a separate self struggling to survive in an indifferent world, but consciousness itself expressing as this particular human form, then caring for others is simply consciousness caring for itself. The suffering we witness in the world is not happening to someone else. It's arising in the same awareness that constitutes our deepest identity. The joy we see in others is not foreign to us. It's our own joy reflected back through different eyes. The love we offer to others is not something we possess that we generously share. It's love recognizing itself wherever it appears. This understanding completely transforms how we relate to difficulty and pain, both our own and others. Instead of seeing suffering as a problem to be solved or avoided, we begin to see it as an invitation to deeper recognition. Each moment of pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, becomes an opportunity to discover the awareness that remains untouched even in the midst of difficulty. When Taro looked at the hungry child, he was not seeing someone separate from himself who needed help. He was seeing his own nature reflected in a form that temporarily needed nourishment. The generosity that flowed from him was not his generosity directed outward. It was life caring for itself through the focal point of his human form. This is perhaps the most liberating understanding about life's true purpose. We are not isolated individuals responsible for manufacturing compassion through willpower and moral effort. We are compassion itself, temporarily experiencing itself through the beautiful limitation of individual perspective. Feel this recognition settling into your own heart now. The awareness that is reading these words is not private or personal. It's the same consciousness that has been experiencing life through every form, feeling every emotion, thinking every thought that has ever arisen. When this awareness encounters suffering, it naturally responds with care. When it meets joy, it naturally celebrates. When it recognizes itself in another, it naturally loves. This love is not an emotion that comes and goes. It's the very fabric of existence itself, the force that holds atoms together, that draws planets around stars, that moves rivers toward the sea. You are not separate from this love. You are this love, temporarily focused through the specificity of your human experience. The real purpose of life is not to become more loving, but to recognize the love you already are. Not to develop compassion, but to stop obscuring the compassion that is your fundamental nature. Not to help others from a position of having something they lack, but to serve from the recognition that there are no others, only consciousness caring for itself in all its myriad forms. As sleep begins to embrace you now, let this love pervade every cell of your being. You are not falling asleep alone. You are love itself, gently returning to the source from which it never departed. Rest in this vast heart that beats in every chest, dreams in every mind, awakens in every moment of recognition. Tomorrow, when you open your eyes, you may see the world exactly as it appeared before. But you will know something that changes everything, that every face you encounter is your own face, every heart you meet is your own heart, every moment of life is your own life expressing itself in infinite, beautiful diversity. This is compassion. This is wisdom. This is the purpose for which you came into being, not to find love, but to remember that you are love itself, playing hide and seek with your own infinite nature. In a small temple at the foot of Mount Fuji, there lived a monk named Jishu who had spent 40 years searching for enlightenment. He had studied every sutra, mastered every meditation technique, completed countless retreats and pilgrimages. His knowledge of Buddhist philosophy was encyclopedic. His concentration skills were legendary among the monastics. Yet despite all his accomplishments, the Great Awakening continued to elude him. Jishu had become the monastery's scholar, the one younger monks approached with questions about doctrine and practice. He could explain the most subtle points of emptiness and interdependence with precision and eloquence. He could guide others through complex meditation instructions with expertise and patience. But in his heart, he carried a secret sorrow. He felt like a fraud, a teacher of enlightenment who had never actually experienced what he taught. Every morning, Jishu would rise at 3 o'clock for meditation, hoping that today would be the day when the veil would finally lift and he would see the truth directly. Every evening, he would review his practice with growing disappointment, wondering what was wrong with him, that liberation remained just beyond his grasp. One autumn day, the monastery received an unexpected visitor, an old woman who appeared at the gates carrying nothing but a walking stick and a small bundle of belongings. She was not impressive to look at. Her clothes were simple peasant garb, her hair unkempt from days of walking mountain paths. But there was something in her eyes that made even the abbot pause when he met her. "I have come to visit your temple," she said simply. "May I stay for a few days?" The abbot, following the tradition of hospitality to all travelers, welcomed her warmly. She was given a small room in the guest quarters and invited to join the community for meals and services. From the first day, Jishu found himself oddly fascinated by this unremarkable old woman. During morning meditation, while he struggled with wandering thoughts and spiritual ambitions, she would sit with a stillness that seemed to emanate from her very bones. During meals, while others ate in the formal silence required by monastic rules, her simple presence seemed to transform the dining hall into a place of quiet celebration. But what struck Jishu most was how she went about the most ordinary activities. When she swept the courtyard, she swept completely, not rushing to finish, not thinking about other tasks, just sweeping with a quality of attention that made even this mundane chore seem somehow sacred. When she walked to the temple for services, each step appeared deliberate and graceful, as if the earth itself was honored by her presence. After several days of observing her, Jishu could contain his curiosity no longer. During free time after evening meditation, he approached her as she sat quietly watching the sunset from the temple garden. "Grandmother, he said respectfully. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I've been watching how you move through your days here. There's something about your presence that feels different from anything I've encountered in 40 years of monastic life. Are you perhaps a teacher? Have you studied with great masters?" The old woman looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold infinite kindness. "Oh, child," she laughed softly, "I'm just an old farm woman. I've never studied anything except how to tend my vegetables and care for my grandchildren. I can barely read the simplest sutras. But surely you must have some special practice, some secret wisdom. The way you sit, the way you walk, the way you simply exist, it's like watching enlightenment in action." The woman was quiet for a long moment, watching a sparrow hop among the fallen leaves at their feet. "Tell me, learned monk, what do you think enlightenment looks like?" Jishu felt a familiar excitement at being asked to demonstrate his knowledge. Enlightenment is the direct realization of emptiness, the dissolution of subject-object duality, the recognition of Buddha, nature, the cessation of suffering through the elimination of ignorance and craving. The woman said gently, "those are very big words for something so simple." "Simple? When I watch that little sparrow," she said, pointing to the bird still searching for seeds among the leaves, "do you think it's enlightened?" Jishu considered this carefully. Well, in the ultimate sense, all beings possess Buddha, nature, but the sparrow lacks the self-awareness to recognize its own true nature. The woman interrupted softly. "But does the sparrow suffer from the belief that it's not enlightened? Does it struggle to achieve some special state of consciousness? Does it worry that it's not spiritual enough?" "Well, no." "Then perhaps the sparrow is already living what you're searching for." That night, Jishu lay awake thinking about the old woman's words. Could it be possible that he had been making enlightenment more complicated than it needed to be? Could all his studying and striving actually be taking him further from what he sought? The next morning during meditation, instead of applying his usual techniques and monitoring his progress towards some imagined goal, Jishu simply sat. He didn't try to achieve anything or become anyone special. He just allowed himself to be present with whatever was already here, the sensation of breathing, the feeling of sitting, the sounds of the temple waking up around him. For the first time in years, his meditation felt natural rather than effortful. There was nothing to attain because sitting itself was already complete. There was no one to become because the awareness sitting was already whole. After meditation, Jishu found the old woman sweeping the same courtyard where he had spoken with her the night before. This time, instead of watching her as if she possessed some secret he needed to learn, he simply picked up another broom and began sweeping alongside her. They worked together in comfortable silence. There was no sense of a student learning from a teacher, no feeling of seeking something from someone else. There was just two people sweeping, two expressions of the same awareness, temporarily focused through different forms, but participating in the same simple activity. As they finished their work, the woman paused and looked at Jishu with a smile that seemed to contain the warmth of 1,000 suns. "There," she said quietly. "Now you're enlightened." Jishu looked around, expecting to feel different, to see some dramatic change in his perception of reality. But everything looked exactly the same as it had moments before. The temple was the same temple. The morning light was the same light, 0, 5. He was the same monk with the same face and the same thoughts. "But nothing has changed," he said with confusion. Exactly, the woman replied. True enlightenment is not about becoming someone different. It's about recognizing what you've always been. You haven't achieved anything special, you've just stopped believing that you needed to. She gathered her simple belongings and prepared to continue her journey down the mountain. Before leaving, she turned to Jishu one last time. The Buddha you've been seeking is the one who was looking for the Buddha. The enlightenment you've been chasing is the awareness that was doing the chasing. The peace you've been practicing for is the consciousness that was aware of practicing. You've always been what you were searching for. You just forgot to notice. After she left, Jishu continued his monastic duties exactly as before. He still rose early for meditation, still studied the sutras, still guided younger monks in their practice. But everything had changed, because nothing needed to change. Meditation became not a technique for achieving enlightenment, but simply sitting completely. Study became not a pursuit of special knowledge, but appreciation for wisdom that was already present. Teaching became not the transmission of something he possessed, but the recognition of what was already alive in every student. Years later, when other monks asked Jishu about his transformation, about the moment when he finally achieved the enlightenment he had sought for so long, he would smile and say, "There was no moment of achievement because there was nothing to achieve. There was only the moment when I stopped believing I was unenlightened." Now, as you rest here in the deep stillness of night, let this story touch the very core of your understanding. For 40 years, Jishu sought something extraordinary, something that would lift him above ordinary human consciousness into a realm of special spiritual attainment. What he discovered was that the extraordinary had been hiding in the ordinary all along. This is perhaps the most profound teaching about life's real purpose. We spend so much energy seeking peak experiences, altered states, mystical realizations, moments of transcendence that will finally prove to us that we are spiritual beings worthy of peace and happiness. But what if the consciousness that seeks these experiences is already what we're looking for? The awareness reading these words right now is not ordinary awareness having a spiritual experience. It's the same consciousness that sages throughout history have pointed to as our deepest nature. It's not personal or limited or in need of improvement. It's the very space in which all experience arises and passes away. You are not a human being who occasionally touches enlightenment during special moments of meditation or insight. You are enlightenment itself, temporarily experiencing the adventure of being human. You are not consciousness trapped in a body, trying to escape into spiritual freedom. You are consciousness playing at limitation, exploring what it's like to imagine boundaries where none actually exist. This understanding completely transforms what we think the spiritual path is about. Instead of seeking to become someone else or achieve some special state, we can simply relax into what we already are. Instead of trying to transcend the human experience, we can appreciate it as a magnificent expression of our true nature. Feel this recognition settling into your awareness now. You don't need to wait for some future moment of awakening. You don't need to accumulate more spiritual experiences or insights or practices. The awakening you seek is the very capacity to seek it. The enlightenment you're looking for is the awareness that knows you're looking. This is why Zen masters often speak of enlightenment as the most ordinary thing in the world. It's not a special achievement reserved for advanced practitioners. It's the natural state that appears when we stop trying to be somewhere else or someone else. It's what remains when all seeking ceases, Not because we've found what we were looking for, but because we've recognized that the one who was looking was what we were looking for. The old woman sweeping the courtyard was not more enlightened than Jishu the scholar. She had simply never believed she was unenlightened. She lived from the recognition that this moment, exactly as it is, lacks nothing. This breath, this heartbeat, this simple awareness of being alive, this is the Buddha nature that all the scriptures point toward. You don't need to understand this intellectually. Understanding is just another experience arising in awareness. You don't need to feel peaceful or blissful or spiritually elevated. Feelings are just weather passing through the sky of consciousness. You don't need to have profound insights or mystical experiences. Experiences come and go, but the awareness in which they appear is constant. What you are is not any particular experience, but the openness in which all experiences are possible. You are not the content of consciousness, but consciousness itself. You are not the waves on the ocean, but the ocean appearing as waves. This is the ultimate teaching about life's purpose. We are not here to become enlightened. We are here as enlightenment, temporarily enjoying the play of apparently forgetting and remembering what we are. We are not here to find meaning, but to be meaning, expressing the infinite creativity of existence through the beautiful particularity of individual lives. As sleep draws you deeper now into rest, know that you are not falling asleep as a separate being who sometimes touches spiritual truth. You are spiritual truth itself, gently returning to the formless awareness that dreams all forms into being. Your individual life is not a problem to be solved, but a love song that existence is singing to itself. Rest completely in this knowing. There is nowhere else to go because you are already where you belong. There is nothing else to achieve because you are already the achievement. There is no one else to become because you are already the very source from which all becoming arises. The search is over not because you found what you were looking for, but because you realized you were never lost. You are home. You have always been home, and this recognition is the deepest purpose any life can fulfill. The real purpose of life is not a destination to reach, but a recognition to awaken to. You are not a traveler journeying toward enlightenment. You are enlightenment itself, temporarily experiencing the adventure of being human. In a small fishing village by the sea, there lived an old fisherman named Akira who had spent his entire life on the water. Every dawn, he would take his simple boat beyond the harbor into the vast blue expanse. Every sunset, he would return with his catch, his heart full of gratitude for another day spent in communion with the sea. But Akira was different from the other fishermen in one remarkable way. While they spoke of the sea as something separate from themselves, something to conquer or negotiate with or be lucky enough to navigate safely, Akira spoke of the sea as if he and it were old friends who had never been apart. "How do you always know where the fish will be?" the younger fisherman would ask him. Akira would smile and gesture toward the horizon. "I don't find the fish. The sea shows me where they are." "But how does the sea speak to you?" "The same way it speaks to you. Through the wind on your face, the pull of the current on your boat, the color of the water in the morning light. The sea is always speaking. Most people are just too busy talking to themselves to listen. Feel how this wisdom applies to your own life as you rest here. Life is always offering its guidance, always showing you the way forward. But so often we're too caught up in our own mental chatter, our plans and worries and judgments, to hear what existence is actually saying. One day, a spiritual teacher from the monastery in the mountains, came to visit the fishing village. He had heard stories of the fisherman who seemed to have found some secret wisdom through his simple life on the water. "I have come to learn from you," the teacher said to Akira. "The monks in our monastery study sacred texts and practice meditation for hours each day, yet many still seem restless and seeking. But you, a simple fisherman, appear to have found what they search for. What is your secret?" Akira laughed, a sound like waves on pebbles. "There is no secret. I just go fishing." "But surely there is some special practice, some technique you use?" "Yes," Akira said, preparing his nets for the next day's journey. "I practice being where I am, doing what I'm doing when I'm doing it. When I'm mending nets, I mend nets completely. When I'm watching the horizon, I watch the horizon completely. When I'm listening to the sea, I listen completely." "That's all?" "That's everything." This is the profound simplicity that Zen masters have pointed to for centuries. The spiritual path is not about adding complicated practices or esoteric knowledge to your life. It's about bringing complete presence to whatever you're already doing. Washing dishes becomes meditation when you wash dishes completely. Walking becomes prayer when you walk with full attention. Even resting becomes enlightenment when you rest completely. The teacher spent 3 days with Akira, going out on the fishing boat each morning. At first, he found the experience frustrating. He kept waiting for the deep teachings to begin, for the profound wisdom to be revealed. Instead, there was just the simple rhythm of daily work, casting nets, reading weather, feeling the movement of the boat on the water. But on the 3rd morning, something shifted. As the teacher sat in the bow watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, listening to the gentle sound of water against the hull, feeling the salt breeze on his face, he suddenly understood what Akira had been teaching all along. This moment was perfect exactly as it was. Nothing needed to be added to make it more spiritual or meaningful. The boat was a temple. The sea was a teacher. The sunrise was a scripture written in light itself. "Ah," the teacher whispered, tears forming in his eyes. "I have been looking for God in books and meditation halls, never noticing that God has been looking at me through the eyes of existence itself." Akira nodded quietly. "Now you understand why I never left the village to find enlightenment. How can you leave yourself to find yourself? 0. 5. Feel this recognition touching your own heart. You have been looking for meaning, purpose, peace, happiness, all the things that make life worth living. But where have you been looking? Outside yourself, in achievements and acquisitions and experiences? When all along, the awareness looking for fulfillment is itself the fulfillment you seek." That evening, as they sat by a small fire on the beach, the teacher asked Akira about the difficulties of life. "But what about when things go wrong? When there are storms, when the catch is poor, when people are difficult? How do you maintain this peace?" Akira stirred the coals with a piece of driftwood, watching the sparks rise into the star-filled sky. "The sea has many moods," he said. "Sometimes calm, sometimes stormy. But it is always the sea. I have many experiences, sometimes easy, sometimes difficult. But I am always myself underneath all experiences." "How did you discover this?" "Through the great storm," Akira replied. And he told the teacher about the night, 20 years earlier, when his boat had been caught far from shore in a typhoon that came up suddenly from the south. For hours, he had fought the mountainous waves, trying to keep his small vessel afloat. His strength was failing. His fear was overwhelming. It seemed certain he would not survive. In that moment of ultimate helplessness, something unexpected happened. He stopped fighting the storm and simply surrendered to whatever would come. And in that surrender, he discovered something that changed his life forever. I realized, Akira said, that I had been trying to survive as a separate self in an hostile universe. But when I let go of that struggle, I discovered I was not separate from the storm, or the sea, or the night. I was part of it all. The storm was not attacking me, it was expressing itself through the whole ocean, of which I was a temporary wave. Were you no longer afraid? The fear was still there. But I was no longer identified with the fear. It was just weather passing through awareness, like the storm was weather passing through the sky. I survived that night not because I conquered the storm, but because I stopped seeing myself as separate from the forces that shape all life. This is perhaps the deepest teaching about life's true purpose. We spend so much energy trying to protect a self that is actually just a temporary pattern, like a wave protecting itself from the ocean. But when we recognize that we are not the wave, we are the ocean expressing itself as a wave, everything changes. You are not a separate being struggling to survive in an indifferent universe. You are the universe expressing itself as a unique, temporary, beautiful pattern of consciousness. Your individual life is not a problem to be solved, but a song to be sung, a dance to be danced, a story to be lived fully and then released. As you rest here now, feel this larger identity. You are not just the thoughts and feelings and sensations of this particular human form. You are the awareness in which all thoughts and feelings and sensations arise. You are the space in which all experiences come and go. You are the silence in which all sounds appear and disappear. The teacher returned to his monastery, transformed by his time with the fishermen. But instead of abandoning his practices, he brought to them a new understanding. Meditation became not an escape from ordinary life, but a way of being fully present with whatever was happening. Study became not an accumulation of knowledge, but a deepening of wisdom. Service became not a duty to perform, but a natural expression of love. The other monks noticed the change immediately. "What did you learn from the fisherman?" they asked. "I learned that I don't need to become enlightened," he replied. "I need to stop pretending that I'm not already enlightened." This is the recognition that ends the spiritual search, not because you've achieved some special state, but because you've remembered what you never actually forgot. The peace you've been seeking is the peace you already are. The love you've been looking for is the love looking through your eyes. The home you've been trying to reach is where you've always been. There's a beautiful final story that captures this perfectly. An old Zen master lay dying, surrounded by his students. They were deeply saddened, knowing they would soon lose their beloved teacher. "Master," one student said through tears, "where will you go when you die? 0. 5. How will we find you again?" The master smiled with eyes that seemed to hold infinite gentleness. "Where can I go? There is nowhere that is not here. How can you lose me? There is no one who is not you. But what is the final teaching you want to leave us?" The master was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sound of rain beginning to fall on the monastery roof. Then he spoke his last words. "The rain has been falling on this roof for 1,000 years. But tonight, for the first time, the roof is grateful. With that, he closed his eyes and passed peacefully, leaving his students with the understanding that would transform their lives. Existence had always been perfect. Life had always been sacred. Every moment had always been a gift. They had simply forgotten to notice. This is the real purpose of life, to wake up to the sacred nature of ordinary existence. To recognize that every breath is a miracle, every heartbeat a blessing, every moment an opportunity to experience the wonder of being alive. You don't need to wait for some future moment of enlightenment. You don't need to earn your way to peace through years of practice. You don't need to become someone special to deserve happiness. Right now, as you rest here, you are experiencing the very thing you've been seeking. The awareness reading these words is not personal or small or limited. It's the same awareness that has been looking through the eyes of sages and fishermen, children and elders for thousands of years. It's the same consciousness that watches stars being born and seasons changing and love flowing between hearts. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are spiritual experience having a human experience. You are not a wave separate from the ocean. You are the ocean playing at being a wave. Feel this truth settling into your bones now. Let it release any sense of inadequacy or incompleteness. Let it dissolve any feeling that you need to be anywhere else or anyone else. Let it bring you home to the simple, profound recognition of what you've always been. As sleep begins to embrace you now, know that you are not falling asleep. You are falling awake. Awake to the dreams that consciousness spins for its own delight. Awake to the play of existence expressing itself through the theater of your mind. Tomorrow, when you open your eyes, the world may look exactly the same, but you will see it differently. Because you will remember what you remembered tonight, that you are not a tourist visiting life temporarily. You are life itself, temporarily visiting this form, this name, this story. The purpose of life is not to achieve or accomplish or become. The purpose of life is to be fully present with whatever is arising, to be completely yourself without apology, to be awake to the miracle that existence is happening at all. You are that miracle. You have always been that miracle. You will always be that miracle. Rest in this knowing. Let everything else fade into the background of awareness. The seeking is over. The journey is complete. You have come home to yourself. In the final years of his life, there lived a Zen master named Myoan who had become legendary throughout Japan, not for his teachings or his wisdom, but for the quality of his presence. People would travel vast distances simply to sit in his company, finding in his silence something more nourishing than the most eloquent sermons. Yet Myoan himself had no sense of being special or accomplished. To him, each day was simply another opportunity to rest in the vast simplicity of being alive. Myoan had not always been this way. In his youth, he had been a passionate seeker, hungry for enlightenment, driven by an almost desperate need to understand the meaning of existence. He had studied with master after master, practiced technique after technique, searched through countless texts for the key that would unlock the mystery of awakening. For 20 years, he had pursued realization with the intensity of a man whose life depended on finding it. He meditated until his legs went numb, fasted until his body trembled with weakness, traveled to remote monasteries in search of teachers who might possess the final piece of the puzzle that would complete his understanding. But as the years passed, a strange weariness began to settle in his bones. Not the weariness of physical exhaustion, though his body had been pushed to its limits many times. This was a different kind of tiredness, a soul-deep fatigue with the very effort of seeking, a growing suspicion that all his striving might be taking him further from what he sought rather than closer to it. On his 50th birthday, sitting alone in a small hermitage he had built in the mountains, Myoan finally admitted to himself what he had been avoiding for years. Despite all his practice, all his study, all his sincere effort, he felt no closer to enlightenment than he had on the day he first began seeking. If anything, the more he learned about what awakening was supposed to look like, the more elusive it seemed to become. That night, sitting before his altar with its simple Buddha statue and offering of wildflowers, Myoan made a decision that would change everything. He would stop. Stop seeking, stop practicing, stop trying to become anything other than what he already was. If enlightenment existed, if peace was possible, if there was any truth to the promises of the ancient teachings, then surely it would have to be available without all this struggle and effort. "I give up," he said aloud to the empty hermitage. If this is not enough, he gestured to his simple room, his ordinary human existence, the sound of wind in the trees outside. If this moment, exactly as it is not already perfect, then I don't know what perfection could possibly mean. As soon as he spoke these words, something extraordinary happened. Nothing changed, and everything changed. The room was still the same small space with rough wooden walls and a single oil lamp. The Buddha statue still sat in the same position, wearing the same serene expression. The sound of night insects continued their ancient chorus outside his window. But Myoan's relationship to all of it shifted completely. The seeking that had driven him for 2 decades simply stopped. Not because he had found what he was looking for, but because he finally understood that the one who was looking and what he was looking for had never been separate. The exhaustion he had been carrying fell away like a heavy cloak he had forgotten he was wearing. In its place was a lightness he had never experienced before, not the giddy lightness of achievement, but the profound ease of no longer needing to be anywhere else or anyone else. He laughed then, softly at first, then with growing appreciation for the cosmic joke he had been living. For 20 years, he had been like a person frantically searching for his glasses while they sat on top of his head. He had been seeking the awareness that was doing the seeking, trying to find the consciousness that was conducting the search. That night, Myoan slept more deeply than he had in decades. Not the heavy sleep of exhaustion, but the natural rest of someone who no longer needed to carry the burden of becoming. When he woke the next morning, the world looked exactly the same as it always had. But he was no longer looking at it as a seeker trying to extract something from experience. He was simply experiencing, simply being present with whatever arose. Word spread slowly through the spiritual communities of Japan that the great seeker Myoan had finally found what he was looking for. Students began arriving at his hermitage, expecting to learn the advanced techniques or receive the profound teachings that had led to his breakthrough. Instead, they found an old man who seemed to do nothing special at all. He would wake naturally with the sunrise, tend his small garden, prepare simple meals, sit quietly by his window watching the seasons change. When visitors arrived, he would welcome them warmly, offer them tea, and listen to their questions with complete attention. But his answers were often disappointingly simple. When asked about the nature of enlightenment, he might point to a flower growing outside his window and say, "This morning it was a bud. This afternoon it's blooming. Tomorrow it will begin to fade." Where is the enlightenment in this process? When students pressed him for meditation instructions or spiritual practices, he would smile and ask, "Are you breathing right now? Are you aware that you're breathing? Then you're already doing the most advanced practice there is." Some visitors left frustrated, convinced that Myoan was either a fraud or had lost his mind. Others sensed something profound in his ordinariness, but couldn't quite grasp what it was. But a few, those who were ready to hear what he was really saying, began to understand that his teaching was not in his words, but in his being. One young monk, after spending a week at the hermitage, finally asked the question that many had wondered about, but few had dared to voice. "Master Myoan, forgive me for asking, but are you enlightened? Have you achieved the awakening that all the scriptures promise?" Myoan was quiet for a long time, watching clouds drift across the afternoon sky. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the gentle authority of someone who had traveled to the end of seeking and discovered what was there. "Who would be enlightened?" he asked softly. "And who would know whether they were or not? I sought enlightenment for 20 years and never found it. Now I've stopped seeking, and it's everywhere I look. Not because something changed, but because I stopped believing that anything needed to change." But surely there was a moment of realization, a breakthrough, an experience of awakening. The breakthrough was realizing there was nothing to break through. The awakening was seeing that I had never been asleep. The experience was recognizing that the one having experiences is not limited by any particular experience. That evening, as the last student departed and Myoan prepared for sleep, he sat for a moment in the doorway of his hermitage, looking up at the star-filled sky. The same sky he had gazed at countless times during his years of seeking, when it had seemed like a distant mystery pointing to transcendence beyond this world. Now it simply appeared as it was, vast, beautiful, present, lacking nothing. Just like the awareness that perceived it. Just like the moment in which the perceiving happened. Just like everything that had ever existed or ever would exist. He rose slowly, his old bones creaking with the movement, and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring another day of simple being, another opportunity to rest in the recognition that had ended his seeking. There would be visitors to welcome, tea to prepare, flowers to tend, moments to experience fully without needing them to be anything other than what they were. As sleep began to embrace him, Myoan's last thought before dreams took him was not a thought at all, but a wordless appreciation for the perfection of imperfection, the completeness of incompleteness, the profound ordinariness of the sacred that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Now, beloved friend, feel how this story completes the journey we have taken together tonight. Like Myoan, you have spent this time exploring the deepest questions of existence, seeking to understand life's true purpose, hungering for insights that might transform your experience of being alive. And what have we discovered together? That the purpose of life is not what most people think it is. It's not the pursuit of happiness or the accumulation of pleasures or the achievement of goals that will finally make you feel complete. It's not even the attainment of some special spiritual state that will lift you above the ordinary concerns of human existence. The real purpose of life is to recognize what you already are. To stop seeking for something outside this moment and start appreciating the awareness that is available right here, right now. To cease the exhausting effort of trying to become someone special and rest in the profound ordinariness of simply being. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are spirit itself, temporarily enjoying the adventure of being human. You are not a separate self trying to connect with the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself through the beautiful focal point of your individual awareness. This recognition doesn't require years of practice or profound experiences or special knowledge. It's available in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this simple awareness of being aware. The consciousness reading these words is not personal or limited or in need of improvement. It's the same awareness that has been present in every moment of seeking, every experience of joy or sorrow, every night of sleep, and every morning of waking. Feel how completely you can rest in this understanding now. There is nothing left to figure out, nothing left to achieve, nothing left to become. The seeking that may have driven you to this moment of rest can finally cease, not because you've found what you were looking for, but because you've recognized that the seeker and the sought were never two. Let your body settle even more deeply now, like a leaf finally coming to rest on the forest floor after a long dance with the wind. Let your breath become so gentle it barely disturbs the silence. Let your mind release all effort, all trying, all reaching toward any experience other than this one. This is the deepest rest, not just the rest of sleep, but the rest of no longer needing to be anywhere else or anyone else. The rest of recognizing that what you are has never been disturbed by any experience, never been limited by any circumstance, never been separate from the source and substance of all existence. You are coming home now, but not to a place you left. You are coming home to what you've always been. You are not falling asleep as a separate being who sometimes touches truth. You are truth itself, gently returning to the formless awareness that dreams all forms into being. Rest completely in this knowing. Let everything else dissolve, all seeking, all becoming, all the beautiful but unnecessary effort of trying to be what you already are. What remains is not emptiness, but fullness. Not absence, but presence. Not a void, but the very source from which all experience arises. This is your nature. This is your home. This is the purpose for which you came into existence, not to find yourself, but to be yourself so completely that the very question of purpose dissolves into the pure joy of being. Sleep now in this recognition. Let consciousness rest in its own nature. Let awareness be aware of nothing but its own unchanging presence. Let the one who has been seeking finally, completely, eternally rest. You are home. You have always been home. And in this homecoming, you discover that you never actually left. The journey ends where it began, in the simple, perfect, ordinary miracle of being aware that you exist. Rest now, beloved. Rest in the deepest peace. Rest in the truth that you are what you have always been seeking. Rest in the love that you are, that everything is, that holds the entire universe in its infinite embrace. All is well. All has always been well. All will always be well. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.